3 days after burying my father, my husband demanded a divorce. The same breath I told him I was carrying his child. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, just slid papers across a mahogany desk and announced his engagement to another woman. I should have shattered, should have begged. Instead, my phone lit up with a message that changed everything. Your father left you $4.7 billion. They killed him for it. Trust no one. In that frozen moment, grief became gasoline. My name is Alina Voss, soon to be Alina Voss Cole no more. And this is how I learned that revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's served in designer heels at your enemy's engagement party. If you're ready to watch me burn down the lies and rebuild an empire, stick with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The rain hammered against the windows of Whitmore and Associates like accusations, each drop a reminder that the universe had timing but no mercy. Alina Voss sat in a leather chair that cost more than her monthly rent, her black dress still carrying the faint scent of funeral flowers and fresh earth. 72 hours. That's how long her father had been in the ground. That's how long her husband had waited. Mrs. Cole. Attorney Gerald Whitmore's voice carried the practiced sympathy of a man who delivered bad news so often it had become muscle memory. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and slid a manila folder across the polished conference table. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Seattle skyline in shades of gray that matched Alina's grief. These are the divorce papers Mr. Cole has requested I present to you. The words landed like physical blows, but Alina's hands remained steady as she reached for the folder. Shock, she would learn, had a way of crystallizing time, stretching seconds into eternities while simultaneously compressing the impossible into the moment between heartbeats. Divorce? Her voice emerged smaller than she intended, and she hated herself for it. Ethan filed for divorce? Whitmore's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Pity, maybe. Or worse, expectation. As if women in her position were supposed to crumble on cue. Mr. Cole felt it would be cleaner to handle this matter through legal representation rather than face me himself. Alina's fingers traced the embossed logo on the folder. 3 days after my father's funeral, he couldn't even wait a week. Mrs. Cole, I understand this is difficult timing. Where is he? Whitmore hesitated. I'm not at liberty to... Where is my husband? The door to the conference room opened, and Ethan Cole walked in like he owned not just the space, but the very air within it. 6'2", perfectly tailored charcoal suit, dark hair styled with just enough product to look effortlessly wealthy. He'd always known how to make an entrance. 3 years of marriage, and Alina still remembered the first time she'd seen him at a gallery opening. Confident, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel chosen just by looking at you. Now, looking at her felt like a business transaction he was eager to close. Alina. He didn't sit, didn't move beyond the doorway. I appreciate you coming. You appreciate... She stood, the folder falling from her lap, papers scattered across the floor like broken promises. You have your lawyer summon me here 3 days after I buried my father, and you appreciate me coming? I thought it would be easier if we kept this professional. Ethan's voice carried no warmth, no recognition of the woman he'd once promised forever. Whitmore has outlined a fair settlement. You'll receive the apartment on Pine Street, a modest monthly allowance for the first year, and I'm pregnant. The words detonated in the silence that followed. Whitmore's pen stopped mid-notation. Ethan's expression flickered. Surprise, calculation, something darker, before settling into stone. I'm 8 weeks pregnant, Ethan, with your child. She'd practiced how she would tell him, had imagined it 100 different ways during the sleepless nights after her father's death. In her imaginings, he'd been shocked but ultimately happy, scared but willing, human at the very least. The man staring at her now was none of those things. That's unfortunate timing, Ethan said finally, but it doesn't change my decision. If anything, it makes this cleaner. You'll receive an additional settlement for medical expenses and support through the first year. After that, I expect minimal contact regarding the child. Minimal contact? Alina's voice cracked. Ethan, this is your baby. Our baby. No. He pulled an envelope from his inner jacket pocket and placed it on the table. This is a complication that should have been avoided. I'm engaged to someone else, Alina. Have been for the last 6 months. The wedding is scheduled for December at the Fairmont. I'd appreciate discretion regarding your condition until after the ceremony. The room tilted. 6 months. While her father had been dying of what the doctors called a sudden heart attack, while she'd been sitting in hospital rooms and making funeral arrangements and trying to understand how her whole world could collapse in the span of a phone call, Ethan had been planning a future that didn't include her. Who is she? The question emerged from somewhere deep and hollow. Victoria Ashford. Ethan said the name like a victory. Her father owns Ashford Industries. I'm sure you understand the practical benefits of the alliance. He'd reduced marriage to a merger. You used me. The realization came slowly, pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. My father's connections, his business relationships. You married me for access. I married you because it made sense at the time. Ethan checked his watch, a Patek Philippe she'd given him for their first anniversary. Your father was a mid-level consultant with decent connections, useful but not essential. Victoria brings capital, international contracts, real influence. I'm sure you can see the difference. Mid-level consultant. Her father, who'd worked 18-hour days and traveled constantly and always made time to call her on Sundays. Reduced to a business card in Ethan's networking file. Sign the papers, Alina. Take the settlement. It's generous given the circumstances. Given the circumstances. Something sharp and dangerous unfurled in Alina's chest. Given that you're a lying, cheating, given that you bring nothing to this marriage beyond a dead father's mediocre legacy and now an unwanted pregnancy. Ethan's voice dropped to a register she'd never heard before. Cold, dismissive, cruel. I'm offering you a way out with your dignity intact. I suggest you take it. He turned toward the door. Ethan, wait. Whitmore will handle the details. I expect your signature by the end of the week. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Alina stood in the wreckage of her life, divorce papers scattered at her feet, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. Behind her, Whitmore cleared his throat. Mrs. Cole, perhaps you'd like some time to review the documents before... Her phone vibrated in her purse. Once. Twice. The third time it buzzed, she pulled it out more to have something to do with her shaking hands than any real interest in who might be calling. Unknown number. She almost declined it, almost let it go to voicemail. But something, instinct, desperation, the simple need to escape the suffocating sympathy in Whitmore's office, made her swipe to answer. Ms. Voss? A woman's voice, clipped and professional. My name is Margaret Chow. I'm calling from Strauss, Goldman, and Chen regarding your father's estate. We need to meet immediately. I already spoke with my father's lawyer. He said there wasn't much. The lawyer you spoke with handles your father's public affairs. I represent his private interests. A pause, weighted with significance. Ms. Voss, your father was not a mid-level consultant. He was one of the most powerful men in the Northern Hemisphere, and 3 days ago, he left everything to you. The floor dropped away. I don't understand. You inherited $4.7 billion in liquid assets, controlling shares in 17 international corporations, property holdings across 6 continents, and a network of contacts that includes heads of state. Margaret's voice lowered. You also inherited his enemies. We have reason to believe your father's death was not natural causes. I'm sending a car to your location. Do not go home. Do not contact anyone you've spoken to in the last month. And Ms. Voss? Trust no one. The line went dead. Alina stared at her phone, then at the divorce papers scattered across the floor, then at the door through which her husband had just walked out of her life. The woman who'd entered this office an hour ago, grief-stricken, betrayed, alone, felt like someone she'd left behind in another lifetime. Her phone buzzed again. A text from the unknown number. The car is waiting, black Mercedes. Driver will identify himself as Dimitri. He'll take you somewhere safe. Your father left you more than money, Alina. He left you weapons. It's time to learn how to use them. Through the rain-streaked windows, Alina could see the Mercedes idling at the curb. The driver, a man built like a concrete wall in a tailored suit, stood beside the passenger door. Whitmore was saying something about scheduling another appointment, about taking time to process, about the emotional impact of sudden loss. His words faded into white noise. Alina gathered her purse, her phone, her fractured composure. She left the divorce papers where they'd fallen, a puzzle of her old life scattered and incomplete. "Mrs. Cole, you haven't signed." "Tell my husband," she said, her voice steady for the first time since entering the office, "that he should be careful what he wishes for." The Mercedes smelled like leather and secrets. Dmitri drove in silence, his eyes constantly checking mirrors, taking turns that seemed random but carried the precision of military training. Alina watched the city slide past, familiar streets suddenly foreign in the gray afternoon light. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "Somewhere Mr. Voss prepared for you." Dmitri's accent was Eastern European, his English perfect but formal. "A place his enemies don't know about." "My father had enemies?" Dmitri's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Ms. Voss, your father had only enemies. The question was always which ones were worth keeping close." They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city proper and climbing into the hills where old money built estates behind gates and hedges. The Mercedes turned onto a private road, passed through security that appeared the moment they approached, and stopped in front of a house that redefined Alina's understanding of wealth. Not a house, an estate. Modern architecture in glass and steel, positioned to capture views of both the Sound and the mountains. Security cameras tracked their approach. Armed guards, actual armed guards, nodded to Dmitri as he opened Alina's door. "This was my father's?" "One of several properties. This one is registered to a shell company that would take a forensic accountant 6 months to trace back to his holdings." Dmitri gestured toward the entrance. "Miss Chow is waiting inside." The interior was minimalist luxury, clean lines, expensive art, furniture that probably cost more than Alina's car. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the water like living paintings. And waiting in the living room, perched on a cream leather sofa with a tablet and 3 phones arranged on the coffee table, was Margaret Chow. She stood when Alina entered, late 40s, impeccable suit, the kind of presence that suggested she'd dismantled opposing counsel before breakfast and still had energy for a hostile takeover at lunch. "Ms. Voss, thank you for coming quickly." "You said my father was murdered." Alina remained standing, her purse clutched like a shield. "You said he left me billions. You said—" "Everything I told you was true." Margaret gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. We have a great deal to discuss, and I'm afraid much of it will be difficult to process." Alina sat. Dmitri took a position by the door, not quite blocking it, but making his presence known. Margaret picked up one of the tablets and swiped through several screens before turning it to face Alina. "Your father, James Voss, presented himself to the world as a business consultant. That was his cover. In reality, he was what we call a fixer, someone who solved problems for people wealthy and powerful enough to pay for discretion." The screen showed photographs Alina had never seen, her father in a tuxedo, shaking hands with a man she recognized as a tech billionaire. Her father in what looked like Dubai, standing with someone who might have been a Saudi prince. Her father in Geneva, Tokyo, Moscow, a ghost moving through the highest echelons of global power. "He didn't just solve problems," Margaret continued. "He created leverage. He knew secrets that could topple governments, destroy corporations, ruin lives. People paid him extraordinary sums to keep those secrets buried. Others paid him even more to help create new ones." "That's not possible." Alina's voice sounded thin even to her own ears. "My father was a good man. He was complicated." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "He loved you very much, Ms. Voss. Every decision he made in the last 28 years was designed to keep you safe and separate from his world. He succeeded until 3 days ago." "The heart attack? Ricin poisoning, staged to look like cardiac arrest? Slow acting, virtually undetectable unless you know to look for it. We caught it during our private autopsy." The room seemed to contract. "Private autopsy?" "Your father had arrangements in place. The moment he died, protocols activated. His body was intercepted before the medical examiner could complete his report. We have people inside most major institutions. Margaret's tone remained clinical, detached from the horror of what she was describing. The official autopsy will show natural causes. The real one tells a different story. Alina's hands found her stomach again, that new instinct to protect what was growing inside her. Who killed him? We're not certain yet. Your father had active conflicts with at least 7 major players. Any one of them had motive. Margaret pulled up another screen. But the timing suggests someone knew about the pregnancy. Ice crystallized in Alina's veins. What? Your father changed his will 6 weeks ago. Previously, his estate was divided among various charities and front organizations. But 6 weeks ago, he consolidated everything, every asset, every account, every piece of leverage he'd accumulated over 30 years, and left it all to you. Margaret's eyes held steady on Alina's. 2 weeks later, you conceived. 3 weeks after that, someone poisoned him. You think someone killed him because of the baby? I think someone killed him because of what the baby represents. An heir, continuity. The possibility that his empire wouldn't dissolve upon his death, but would instead transfer to someone young, vulnerable, and completely unprepared. Margaret set down the tablet. Killing you now would raise questions. But if you'd never known about the inheritance, if you'd simply continued your life as Ethan Cole's wife, the estate would have eventually been carved up by competitors, problem solved without drawing attention. Alina stood, pacing to the windows. The sound stretched out below, gray and restless. Why are you telling me this? Why not just let it happen? Because your father spent 28 years building something extraordinary. Not just wealth, though there's plenty of that. Power. Real, fundamental power over people and systems and the hidden mechanisms that make the world turn. Margaret's reflection appeared beside Alina's in the glass. And because he left instructions, if anything happened to him, I was to give you a choice. What choice? Margaret pulled an envelope from her briefcase. Cream-colored paper, expensive weight, sealed with actual wax. You can walk away. We'll arrange a quiet sale of the major assets, distribute the proceeds, and set you up with enough money to live comfortably forever. You'll sign NDAs, relocate if you choose, and never have to think about any of this again. Or you can inherit everything. The power, the enemies, the weight of running an empire most people don't even know exists. Margaret held out the envelope. Your father spent the last 6 months preparing material for you. Training resources, contact lists, detailed breakdowns of every operation and obligation. He knew this might happen. He wanted you to have the choice he never did. Alina took the envelope. Her name on the front in her father's handwriting, the last thing he'd written to her. Inside, a letter and a key. My dearest Alina, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I lived. I spent your whole life trying to keep you separate from my world, and I succeeded perhaps too well. You've grown into someone good and kind, everything I wanted for you, everything I couldn't be. But now you have a choice. You can remain good and kind and safe. Or you can become what I was, someone powerful enough to protect what they love by ensuring no one dares threaten it. I won't pretend the second path is easy. It will require you to become someone you may not recognize, to make decisions that will haunt you. To understand that power, real power, is neither good nor evil. It simply is, and the question is only whose hands wield it. If you choose to walk away, I understand. I love you enough to want you happy more than I want you safe. But if you choose to stay, to learn, to become what this empire needs, then know that I built all of this for you. Every asset, every contact, every carefully cultivated piece of leverage. It was always meant to be yours. The key opens a safe deposit box at First National, downtown branch, box 1408. Inside you'll find everything you need to begin. Margaret will help you. Dimitri will protect you. Trust them as I did. And Alina, the people who took me from you will try to take everything else too. Don't let them. You're stronger than you know. You always have been. Make them remember that strength. All my love, Dad. Alina read it twice, 3 times. Her father's voice so clear in every word that she could hear him saying them. The man who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped with calculus homework and never ever missed a Sunday phone call. The same man who'd apparently built an empire on secrets and fear and power. Both true. Both him. How long do I have to decide? She asked. The world believes you're a grieving daughter going through a divorce. That gives you perhaps a week before people start asking questions about James Voss's estate. Margaret checked one of her phones. After that, the wolves will start circling. A week to decide between safety and power, between the life she'd known and the inheritance she'd never wanted. Alina's phone buzzed. Text message from Ethan. I assume you've reviewed the papers. My lawyer will collect your signature tomorrow. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. As if she'd been the one having an affair. As if she'd been the one dismissing their child as a complication. As if 3 years of marriage could be filed away like a tax return, neat and clean and utterly devoid of the messiness of actual human feeling. The settlement he's offering, Alina said slowly. What did you say it was? Margaret had clearly already reviewed the divorce papers. The apartment on Pine Street, valued at approximately $800,000, with a mortgage of $650,000 that you'll assume responsibility for. A monthly allowance of $5,000 for the first year, after which you're on your own. An additional $50,000 for medical expenses related to the pregnancy, and a trust fund for the child that will pay out $2,000 monthly until they turn 18. And he keeps everything else. Everything. The penthouse you've been living in, that's in his name. The vacation property in Cabo, his name. Your joint accounts will be split 70-30 in his favor because he can document that most of the deposits came from his income. Margaret's expression hardened. Ms. Voss, I should tell you something else. While reviewing your financial records, we discovered several concerning irregularities. Alina turned from the window. What kind of irregularities? Your husband has been using your social security number and identity to open credit accounts. You currently have $340,000 in debt across 17 different cards and loans that you never applied for. Margaret's voice took on a prosecutorial edge. He's also listed you as a co-signer on several business ventures that are, to put it mildly, not going well. If those ventures fail, creditors will come after you first. The floor seemed to shift beneath Alina's feet. That's fraud. Yes, and nearly impossible to prove without forensic accounting and legal resources that would cost more than you could afford on your own. Margaret paused. Unless, of course, you had access to different resources. The implication hung in the air between them. Alina looked down at the letter in her hands. At her father's words, make them remember that strength. Then at her phone, Ethan's text still glowing on the screen like a challenge. The safe deposit box, she said quietly. What's in it? I don't know. Your father didn't share everything with me, but whatever it is, he thought you'd need it. Margaret's tone shifted, became something almost gentle. Ms. Voss, Alina, I understand this is overwhelming. You've lost your father, your marriage is ending, you're pregnant, and now you're being told you've inherited an empire and enemies in equal measure. No one would blame you for walking away. But your father believed you could do this. He believed you had the strength, the intelligence, and the will to not just survive his world, but master it. Margaret picked up another phone, typed something quickly, and set it down. I've known powerful people my entire career. I can usually tell within minutes whether someone has what it takes. And you, Alina Voss? You're angry, hurt, betrayed. But you're still standing. You're still thinking. That's more than most people manage on their best day, let alone their worst. Alina moved back to the sofa, sank into leather that probably cost more than her car. Her mind raced through possibilities, consequences, the sheer impossibility of what was being offered. If I say yes, she began slowly, if I choose to take the inheritance, what happens next? Next, you become very hard to kill and very expensive to cross. Margaret's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. We activate your father's security protocols, move you to secured locations, begin your education in how his empire functions. And most importantly, we make it very clear to everyone who might be watching that James Voss's daughter is not someone to underestimate. And Ethan? That depends on how you want to handle it. We could pursue legal action for the identity theft and fraud. Could take years, cost him his reputation, possibly jail time. Margaret leaned forward. Or we could do something your father would have done, which is make him irrelevant. Margaret's eyes glittered. Your husband is marrying Victoria Ashford for her father's money and connections. What if those connections suddenly became complicated? What if Ashford Industries found itself facing regulatory scrutiny or lost key contracts or discovered their newest board member had a history of financial fraud they'd failed to properly vet? You can do that? Ms. Voss, your father could do that. If you inherit his empire, so can you. Margaret stood, walked to the windows, looked out at the gray water. But understand, once you start down that path, there's no coming back. You can't unbecome powerful. You can't unknow what you'll learn. The Alina Voss who walked into that lawyer's office this morning, she's gone either way. The question is who you become in her place. The weight of it settled over Alina like a physical thing. Every choice, every path forward led away from the life she'd known. But then again, that life had been built on lies. Ethan's lies about loving her, her own ignorance about who her father really was. The comfortable fiction that being good and kind and quiet was enough to protect you from the world's cruelty. 3 days ago, she'd buried her father, believing he was a mid-level consultant who'd loved her, but left her nothing. Now she knew the truth. He'd loved her enough to give her everything, including the choice of what to do with it. I want to see what's in the safe deposit box, Alina said finally. Margaret smiled. I'll have Dimitri drive you. We should go soon. The bank closes at 5. And then? And then you decide. Really decide. Not because you're angry at your husband or grieving your father or scared of what might come next, but because you've looked at all the pieces and chosen the life you want to live. Margaret extended her hand. Whatever you choose, Ms. Voss, choose it with your eyes open. Alina shook her hand. Margaret's grip was firm, businesslike, the grasp of someone used to brokering deals that shaped markets. One more thing, Alina said as Margaret turned to leave. You said my father's death might be connected to the pregnancy, that someone killed him to prevent his empire from passing to an heir. That's our working theory. Does that mean whoever killed him knows about the baby? Margaret's expression darkened. Possibly, which is why we need to move quickly. If they know, they'll either try to eliminate you before you can inherit or wait until after and use the child as leverage. Then we have less than a week. More like less than 72 hours before people start asking where you've disappeared to. Your husband will notice when you don't sign the papers. Your neighbors will notice when you don't come home. Questions will be asked. Alina thought about the apartment she'd shared with Ethan, the cheerful yellow walls she'd painted herself, the bookshelf full of novels she'd meant to read, the nursery she'd started planning in her head, not knowing the father would want nothing to do with the child. All of it feeling suddenly like someone else's life, someone smaller, someone who believed the world was fair and love was enough and good things happened to good people if they just tried hard enough. I'm not going back there, Alina said, to the apartment, to any of it. That's probably wise. We'll arrange to have your personal items collected and… No, I'm done going back to being the person who gets discarded, the person who gets lied to, the person everyone thinks will just sign the papers and go away quietly. Alina stood, her father's letter still clutched in one hand. I want to see the safe deposit box. I want to know everything my father left me, and then I want to know how to make the people who killed him pay for it. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Dimitri will take you to the bank. I'll make some calls, start putting pieces in motion. When you come back, we'll begin planning your education. How long will that take? To learn what your father knew? Years? To learn enough to survive and fight back? Margaret's smile turned predatory. We'll make it work in the time we have. The rain had stopped by the time Dimitri pulled the Mercedes up to First National Bank's downtown branch. The building was all granite and glass, the kind of institutional architecture designed to inspire confidence in the permanence of money. Alina had passed it 1,000 times, never thinking her father had secrets locked inside. Dimitri accompanied her past security, through the lobby, to the private banking section where safe deposit boxes lived behind vault doors and biometric scanners. A manager materialized, a man whose suit probably cost more than Alina's wedding dress had, and checked her ID with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he'd been briefed. Box 1408, he confirmed. Right this way, Ms. Voss. The vault was exactly what Alina expected. Steel, cameras, climate control, the hushed atmosphere of secured wealth. The manager used his key, Alina used the one from her father's letter, and the box slid free from its slot. "I'll give you privacy," the manager said, gesturing to a small room off the main vault. "Take your time." Alina carried the box like it might explode. Dmitri remained outside, a silent presence between her and the world. She closed the door, sat at the small table, and opened her inheritance. Inside, 3 phones, 2 passports, one in her name with a photo she'd never posed for, a thick stack of documents, and a tablet loaded with what appeared to be hundreds of encrypted files. But on top of everything else, a USB drive with a sticky note in her father's handwriting, "Start here." Alina pulled out the tablet, found the USB port, plugged in the drive. A single video file loaded. She pressed play, and her father's face filled the screen. He looked tired. This had been recorded recently. She could tell by the gray at his temples, more pronounced than in her memory. He was in a room she didn't recognize, somewhere with warm lighting and wood paneling. "Alina, my beautiful girl. If you're watching this, I've run out of time to tell you the truth in person. I'm sorry for that. Sorry for many things, but mostly for leaving you to face alone what we should have faced together. I've spent your whole life trying to protect you from my world, from the violence and compromise and moral complexity that comes with the kind of power I wielded. I wanted you to be good, to be better than me. And you are. You're everything I hoped you'd become. But now you need to be something else too. Not instead of good, but alongside it. You need to be strong enough that no one mistakes your kindness for weakness. Powerful enough that your goodness is a choice, not a limitation. This tablet contains everything. My contacts, my operations, my leverage on every major player who might come after you. Margaret will help you understand it all. Dmitri and his team will keep you physically safe. But the most important thing, the thing only you can do, is decide what kind of power you want to wield. I built this empire on fear and secrets. People did what I wanted because I knew things that could destroy them. That's one kind of power, and it works. But it also makes you paranoid and alone and constantly watching for the knife aimed at your back. You could build something different. Power based on loyalty instead of leverage. Strength that comes from being genuinely helpful instead of dangerous. It would take longer, be harder, require you to trust people I never trusted. But you're pregnant now. Alina's breath caught. He'd known. Even before she'd known. Somehow he'd known. I have sources everywhere, including your doctor's office. Forgive me for the invasion of privacy, but I needed to know if something was changing. And this changes everything. You're not just making decisions for yourself anymore. You're making them for my grandchild, for the legacy that extends beyond both of us. That's not pressure, it's clarity. Whatever you build, build it to last. Build it clean enough that you can explain it to that child someday without shame. I failed at that. Failed to build something I could share with you without corrupting what made you good. Don't make my mistakes. Be powerful, yes, but be powerful in a way that lets you sleep at night. The documents in this box include access to accounts, property deeds, contact information for people who owe me favors. Use them. That's why they exist, but use them carefully. Everyone who helped me did so because I had leverage. You'll need to decide whether to maintain that leverage or build something new. I love you, Alina. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I won't be there to meet my grandchild. But I absolutely know, you'll be a better parent than I was. You'll find a way to be both powerful and good, to protect without becoming what you're protecting against. Start with the documents marked Priority 1. Those are immediate threats that need handling. Margaret knows the details. Trust her. She's been with me for 15 years and never once betrayed my confidence. And Alina? Don't let them make you small. Don't let anyone, Ethan, his new fiancé, the people who killed me, don't let them make you believe you're less than you are. You're a boss. Act like it. Now go make me proud, and maybe burn a few bridges. Carefully. Strategically. But burn them nonetheless. The video ended. Alina stared at the frozen image of her father's face, his slight smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was pleased with himself. He'd known about the baby, about Ethan's affair probably, about everything falling apart, and he'd still believed she could handle it. She wiped tears she hadn't realized were falling and turned to the documents marked Priority 1. 3 files. Ashford Industries, Regulatory Exposure. A detailed breakdown of environmental violations, safety shortcuts, and accounting irregularities that Ashford Industries had successfully buried. Evidence that could trigger federal investigations and tank their stock price. Ethan Cole. Financial fraud. Everything Margaret had mentioned and more. Account numbers, dates, transaction records. Her own signature forged on documents she'd never seen. A pattern of theft and deception that went back to the first month of their marriage. Project Nightfall. This one had no subtitle, just a date, 6 weeks ago, and a location in Singapore. Alina opened it to find surveillance photos of her father meeting with 3 men she didn't recognize, notes about a deal gone wrong, threats made, and a final entry. They'll move against me within the month. Make sure Alina understands. This wasn't random. They're afraid of what she represents. Alina's hands shook as she closed the files. Her father hadn't just known he was in danger. He'd known exactly who was threatening him. And he'd still gone ahead with whatever Project Nightfall was, knowing it might cost him his life. Because he believed whatever he was protecting, whatever he was building, was worth dying for. Make them remember that strength. She gathered the phones, the passports, the documents, packed everything back into a leather portfolio she found in the box. Her father's empire, reduced to a bag she could carry. But weight wasn't measured in pounds. It was measured in consequences. And everything in this box carried consequences that could reshape her entire world. Dmitri looked up when she emerged from the vault. You found what you needed? I found enough. Alina handed him the portfolio. How fast can we get back to the estate? 20 minutes without traffic. Why? Because I need Margaret to start making phone calls. We have work to do. Dmitri's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a kind of attention that suggested he'd been waiting for this moment. What kind of work? Alina thought about Ethan's text, about his dismissive voice saying complicated and unfortunate timing, and I expect minimal contact. About Victoria Ashford, who thought she was marrying into influence without realizing her father's empire was built on violations Alina now had evidence of. About her father's killers, whoever they were, thinking she'd be too broken or too ignorant to fight back. The kind, she said, that reminds people why you don't underestimate someone just because they've been kind. Dmitri smiled. It wasn't a comforting expression. Your father would have liked hearing you say that. They walked back through the bank, past security, into the gray afternoon. The rain had started again, softer now, misting the city in layers of watercolor light. Alina climbed into the Mercedes and pulled out one of the phones from the portfolio. It powered up immediately, no password needed. A single contact in the directory, Margaret Chow. She texted, I've made my decision. Let's begin. The response came back in seconds. Welcome to the family business. See you in 20 minutes. Alina leaned back against leather that smelled like money and power, and her father's last gift to her. Outside, Seattle slid past in shades of gray. Somewhere in this city, Ethan was probably having dinner with Victoria, celebrating his new engagement, his escape from the wife who'd outlived her usefulness. Let him celebrate. Let him think he'd won. In 20 minutes, Alina would begin learning how to dismantle everything he'd built. Not with anger, though there was plenty of that, but with precision. With her father's tools and Margaret's guidance and a clarity of purpose she'd never felt before. She wasn't the woman who'd walked into Whitmore's office this morning. That woman was gone, buried alongside the illusion that being good was enough to protect you from the world's teeth. The woman she was becoming? That woman had her father's empire at her fingertips and a child to protect and absolutely nothing left to lose. That woman was going to be dangerous, and everyone who'd underestimated her was about to learn exactly how dangerous she could be. The estate felt different when Alina returned. No longer a stranger's house, but a fortress being prepared for war. Margaret met her in the foyer, tablet in hand, 3 assistants hovering behind her like satellites in expensive suits. Your father's security protocols are now active, Margaret said without preamble. Dmitri's team has swept the property. We've established secure communication channels and begun monitoring your husband's movements. He's currently at this Fairmont having drinks with Victoria Ashford and her father. Alina followed Margaret into what appeared to be a study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk that could have hosted treaty negotiations, windows overlooking the sound. One of the assistants closed the door behind them. "I've reviewed the priority one files," Alina said, setting the portfolio on the desk. "My father knew who was threatening him." "Project Nightfall." "Yes." Margaret pulled up a secure file on her tablet. 3 men. Chen Wei, a Chinese industrialist with ties to rare earth mining. Dmitry Volkov, not to be confused with your Dmitry, a Russian oligarch who made his fortune in natural gas. And Marcus Pelletier, French arms dealer with clients in 17 countries. Your father was negotiating a deal that would have given him controlling interest in their supply chains. What kind of deal? The kind that would have made him indispensable. They needed his connections to navigate US and European regulatory frameworks. He needed their resources to expand into Asian and African markets. Margaret's expression hardened. The deal fell apart when your father discovered they were using those same supply chains for human trafficking. He threatened to expose them unless they cleaned up their operations. Alina sank into the leather chair behind the desk, her father's chair. So they killed him. We believe so. The ricin came from a laboratory in Prague that Pelletier has used before. The timing matches. 2 days after your father issued his ultimatum, he started showing symptoms. Margaret paused. They're powerful men, Ms. Voss, wealthy, connected, and very good at making problems disappear. Going after them directly would be suicide. Then we don't go after them directly. Alina opened the portfolio, pulled out the file on Ashford Industries. We go after their legitimacy, their business relationships, their ability to operate in the shadows. She looked up at Margaret. My father said you've been with him for 15 years. How many of his enemies have you helped destroy? Margaret's smile was winter sharp. I stopped counting at 30. Then teach me. Show me how this works. For the next 3 hours, Margaret walked Alina through the architecture of her father's empire. Not the money, that was almost incidental, but the networks of obligation and leverage that made the money matter. Every file represented someone who owed James Voss a favor, or feared what he knew, or needed his connections badly enough to pay whatever price he named. Your father never demanded loyalty, Margaret explained, pulling up a contact database with thousands of entries. He cultivated usefulness, made himself the person people called when they had problems no one else could solve. Corporate espionage? Call James. Hostile takeover protection? Call James. Blackmail material on a business rival? Call James. That's not power, Alina said slowly. That's parasitism. No, parasitism takes without providing value. Your father provided enormous value. He just made sure the price was high and the debt was remembered. Margaret zoomed in on a cluster of contacts in Seattle. Look at this network: judges, prosecutors, city council members, developers, union leaders. Your father knew who was sleeping with whom, who had gambling debts, who'd cut corners on construction projects. He never used that information unless necessary, but everyone knew he had it. So they did what he wanted out of fear. They did what he wanted because the alternative was worse. That's not the same as fear, it's calculation. Margaret pulled up another file. But you're right to be uncomfortable with it. This model has limitations. It requires constant maintenance, constant surveillance. And the moment you show weakness, the moment people think they can move against you without consequences, the whole thing collapses. Alina thought about her father's video message, about building something different. What if we changed the model? How? Instead of making people afraid of what we know, what if we made them grateful for what we provide? Real value, not just protection from exposure. Alina stood, paced to the windows. Rain streaked the glass, turning the city lights into watercolor smears. My father had leverage on these people because he solved their problems. What if we solved bigger problems? Built actual alliances instead of forcing cooperation? Margaret studied her for a long moment. That would take time, resources, and a willingness to trust people who might betray you. But it would also build something sustainable, something I could pass on to my child without teaching them that power only comes from fear. Alina turned back to face Margaret. You said my father wanted me to choose what kind of power to wield. I'm choosing this, not instead of using his leverage. We'll need that to survive the immediate threats, but as the foundation for whatever comes after. Your father tried something similar once, Margaret said quietly. Early in his career, He built a partnership with 3 other fixers, pooled resources, shared intelligence, genuinely trusted each other. What happened? 2 of them tried to kill him when they thought his half of the partnership was worth more than their alliance. He survived. They didn't. Margaret's voice carried the weight of old scars. After that, he never fully trusted anyone again. Then I'll have to be smarter about who I trust. Alina returned to the desk, pulled out the file on Ethan, starting with making sure my husband can't destroy me before I learn how to protect myself. Margaret's expression shifted to something almost predatory. What did you have in mind? He's buried me in debt, committed fraud using my identity, and plans to marry into the Ashford fortune. I want him exposed, humiliated, and legally destroyed. Alina's voice remained steady, clinical. But I want him to know it was me. I want him to understand exactly who he underestimated. We could do that. Margaret pulled out her phone, typed rapidly. I know prosecutors who would love to build a case on this kind of systematic fraud. The evidence your father gathered is bulletproof. Forensic accountants could trace every fraudulent account back to Ethan within 48 hours. How long would a case like that take? To prosecute? 18 months, maybe 2 years. To destroy his reputation and tank his engagement? Margaret looked up, smiling. I could have that done by Monday. How? Victoria Ashford's father is paranoid about due diligence. Has to be. His company has survived 3 hostile takeover attempts in the last decade. He runs background checks on everyone who comes within 5 feet of his daughter. Margaret pulled up a document on her tablet. What if those background checks suddenly revealed that his daughter's fiancé is under investigation for identity theft and fraud? What if Ethan's business partners started receiving subpoenas? What if the media got an anonymous tip about a financial scandal involving a prominent Seattle businessman? Alina felt something dark and satisfied unfurl in her chest. You can orchestrate all of that? Ms. Voss, I can have it orchestrated by morning. The question is whether you want to move this quickly. Once we pull this trigger, there's no taking it back. Ethan will know someone with serious resources is moving against him. He might even guess it's you. Good. Alina's hands found her stomach again, that protective instinct growing stronger. Let him guess. Let him lie awake wondering how his mediocre consultant's daughter suddenly has the power to dismantle his life. Let him feel what I felt sitting in that office while he dismissed our child as a complication. Margaret nodded slowly. Your father would have approved. He believed revenge was a waste of energy unless it also served a strategic purpose. Destroying Ethan accomplishes several things, eliminates a threat, severs his connection to Ashford Industries, and sends a message to anyone else watching that you're not someone to dismiss. Then do it. All of it. Alina pulled out one of the phones from the portfolio. What about the 3 men who killed my father? Chen, Volkov, Pelletier. Can we touch them? Not directly, not yet. They're too powerful, too insulated. Moving against them would require resources we don't currently have and alliances we haven't built. Margaret's expression turned calculating. But we can make their lives complicated. Your father had leverage on all 3. Evidence of their trafficking operations, documentation of illegal weapons sales, proof of environmental crimes. We leak that information strategically, trigger investigations, tie up their resources in legal battles, make them too busy defending themselves to focus on you. Will that be enough to keep them from coming after me? For now. They'll be watching to see what you do with your father's empire. If you seem incompetent or uninterested, they'll wait for you to self-destruct and then carve up the remains. If you seem dangerous, they'll either try to eliminate you or co-opt you. Margaret leaned forward. The key is to appear strong enough to be costly to attack, but not so threatening that they have no choice but to move against you. A razor's edge. Your father lived on that edge for 30 years. You'll learn to walk it too. A soft knock interrupted them. Dmitri entered carrying a laptop. The surveillance package you requested is ready. Margaret gestured him in. He set the laptop on the desk, opened it to reveal multiple video feeds. Alina recognized the Fairmont's bar. Elegant, expensive, the kind of place where deals were made over single malt scotch and artisanal cocktails. And there, in perfect high-definition clarity, sat Ethan Cole. He looked relaxed, confident, his arm around Victoria Ashford like he'd already won. Victoria's father, Gerald Ashford, sat across from them, older, distinguished, the kind of man who'd built an empire through shrewd investments and ruthless negotiation. "We have audio too," Dmitri said, adjusting the volume. Ethan's voice filtered through the speakers. "Appreciate you taking the time to meet with me informally, Gerald. I know how busy you are." "Not too busy for family," Gerald replied. His voice carried the slight gravel of someone who'd spent decades giving orders. "Victoria speaks very highly of you, says you have vision." "I try to see opportunities others miss." Ethan sipped his drink. "Take my current situation, for example. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, comes from a family with decent connections but limited capital. The marriage made sense when her father was alive, but now?" He shrugged. "I need a partner who can match my ambitions. Someone like Victoria." Alina's hands clenched. Margaret touched her arm gently. "Keep watching." Victoria leaned into Ethan, her voice honey-sweet. "Daddy, Ethan's been so patient with the divorce proceedings. His wife is being difficult about the settlement." "How difficult?" Gerald's tone sharpened. "She's grieving her father, making everything emotional and complicated. I've offered her a generous settlement, more than fair given the circumstances, but she's dragging her feet." Ethan's expression carried just the right amount of concerned frustration. "I hate to speak ill of her, but I'm worried she might try to make claims on assets that are clearly mine." Gerald nodded slowly. "You'll want to protect yourself legally. Victoria's inheritance will be substantial when I retire. Can't have complications from previous marriages muddying those waters." "Exactly my concern," Ethan agreed. Alina felt her jaw clench hard enough to hurt. Margaret squeezed her arm again. "Patience. This is useful intelligence." "How is it useful to watch him lie about me?" "Because now we know exactly what story he's telling, what narrative he's building, and we can destroy it with precision." Margaret made a note on her tablet. "Gerald Ashford values control and clarity above almost everything else. He hates surprises, hates mess, hates anything that might complicate his carefully managed empire. What do you think happens when he discovers Ethan isn't a rising businessman with an unfortunate marriage? He's a con artist with a trail of fraud and a pregnant ex-wife he's trying to bury? He'll end the engagement. He'll obliterate Ethan." Margaret's smile was vicious. "Men like Gerald don't just walk away from threats. They eliminate them completely. And right now, Ethan is about to become the biggest threat to Gerald's daughter and business empire." On screen, the conversation continued. Victoria was laughing at something Ethan said, her hand on his arm, completely unaware that she was dating a man who'd spent 3 years systematically defrauding his pregnant wife. "I want her to know too," Alina said suddenly. "Victoria, I want her to understand exactly who she's marrying." Margaret considered this. "We could arrange that. Anonymous package? Detailed documentation of Ethan's fraudulent activities, the debt he's buried you under, proof he's been planning this engagement while still married to you?" "No, not anonymous." Alina stood, paced back to the windows. The rain was heavier now, turning the city into a smear of light and shadow. "I want to tell her myself, face to face. I want her to see the woman her fiancé dismissed as a complication, look her in the eyes, and explain exactly what kind of man she's planning to marry." "That's risky," Margaret warned. "It exposes you, shows your hand before we're ready. Or it shows strength, confidence, the kind of woman who doesn't hide behind lawyers and anonymous tips." Alina turned back. "My father built power on secrets and leverage. I want to build it on something else. Direct confrontation, honesty weaponized." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the tablet. Finally, she nodded. "It could work. Victoria Ashford is 26, smart, ambitious. She's not just marrying Ethan for love. She's marrying him because she thinks he's useful to her career. If you can convince her he's actually a liability, she might turn on him herself." "How do I arrange a meeting?" "Leave that to me. I'll make sure she receives an invitation she can't refuse." Margaret glanced at the laptop screen where Ethan was still holding court. "But Ms. Voss, Alina, understand that once you do this, you're declaring yourself a player. You're stepping out of the shadows your father kept you in and making yourself visible to everyone watching. That includes his enemies." "I'm already visible. I inherited billions of dollars and an empire. People are watching whether I hide or not." Alina moved back to the desk, to the chair that had been her father's. The only question is what they see when they look. Do they see someone broken and grieving and easy to manipulate? Or do they see someone who knows exactly what she's inherited and isn't afraid to use it? Your father spent 28 years teaching you to be kind, Margaret said softly. Are you sure you're ready to learn cruelty? I'm not learning cruelty. I'm learning consequences. Alina met Margaret's gaze steadily. There's a difference. Cruelty is hurting people for pleasure. Consequences are making sure people understand the cost of their choices. Ethan chose to commit fraud, chose to dismiss his child, chose to humiliate me in a lawyer's office 3 days after my father's funeral. I'm just making sure he understands what those choices cost. Margaret smiled. Your father would have loved hearing you say that. He always believed the best revenge was making someone understand exactly how they'd failed to recognize who they were dealing with. She stood, gathering her tablet and phones. I'll arrange the meeting with Victoria. Give me 48 hours. In the meantime, we need to get you up to speed on the operational side of your inheritance. What does that mean? It means you need to understand the full scope of what you've inherited. Not just the money and the leverage, but the actual businesses, the legitimate operations, the infrastructure your father built to support everything else. Margaret gestured to one of the assistants. David will be your operational manager. He's been managing the day-to-day of your father's portfolio for the last 8 years. The assistant stepped forward, mid-30s, sharp suit, the kind of competence that came from managing complicated things smoothly. Ms. Voss, I've prepared briefing materials on all 17 corporations you now control. When would you like to begin reviewing them? Alina looked at the portfolio on the desk, the phones, the tablet full of her father's secrets, looked at the laptop screen showing her husband laughing with his mistress, looked at Margaret, Dimitri, David, all of them waiting for her direction. 24 hours ago, she'd been a pregnant woman going through a divorce, grieving her father and trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that had collapsed. Now she was standing in an estate she owned, surrounded by people whose job was to help her wield billions of dollars and 3 decades of accumulated power. The whiplash should have been overwhelming, should have sent her running back to the safety of ignorance and the comfort of being small. Instead, she felt something clicking into place, a sense of purpose sharper than grief, stronger than anger. Her father had built this empire, had died protecting it, had trusted her, chosen her to carry it forward. She wasn't going to let him down. We start now, Alina said. I want to understand everything, the businesses, the operations, the people, all of it. And I want to be ready when I meet Victoria Ashford. When she looks at me, I want her to see someone who knows exactly what she's doing and exactly how to destroy anyone who underestimates her. David nodded. I'll have the materials ready in the conference room in 15 minutes. And I'll start working on the Victoria meeting, Margaret added. But Alina, one more thing. You're going to need a new phone. Your current one can be tracked, monitored. Everyone you've called in the last month needs to be considered potentially compromised. Alina pulled out her regular phone, the one with messages from Ethan, from friends asking how she was doing, from the life she was leaving behind. She held it for a moment, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Then she handed it to Margaret. Get rid of it. Set up whatever secure communication I need. I'm done being accessible to people who use access as a weapon. Margaret took the phone like it was evidence at a crime scene. I'll have a new one configured within the hour. In the meantime, you're off the grid. No one can reach you who doesn't go through me first. The assistants filed out, leaving Alina alone with Margaret and Dimitri. The study felt larger in their absence, the shadows deeper. Rain drummed against the windows in rhythms that sounded almost musical. This is the last chance, Margaret said quietly. Once we start moving, once we set all these pieces in motion, there's no stopping it. Ethan will be destroyed, Victoria will be confronted, your father's enemies will take notice. You'll be committed to this path with no easy way back to the life you had before. Alina thought about the apartment on Pine Street, the one Ethan was offering her in the divorce settlement, thought about living there alone with a baby, struggling with debt she hadn't created, watching her ex-husband build a life with another woman while she tried to survive on $5,000 a month. Thought about her father's video message. Don't let them make you small. I don't want the life I had before, she said. That life was built on lies. Ethan's lies. My ignorance about who my father really was, the comfortable fiction that being good and quiet was enough. I want something real, something powerful enough to protect my child from ever feeling as helpless as I felt in that lawyer's office. Then we move forward. Margaret extended her hand again. Welcome to your inheritance, Ms. Voss. Try not to let it destroy you. Alina shook her hand, feeling the weight of the commitment settle over her like armor. It won't destroy me. I won't let it. Margaret's smile was sharp and approving. Your father said the same thing 30 years ago. Let's hope you're better at keeping that promise than he was. Over the next 48 hours, Alina lived inside a crash course in empire management that would have broken most people. David walked her through the 17 corporations, tech companies, real estate holdings, private security firms, consulting agencies that were fronts for intelligence operations. Margaret educated her on the leverage files, teaching her to read between the lines of seemingly innocuous documentation to understand the real power dynamics at play. And Dmitri, quiet and efficient, made sure she understood the physical security protocols that would keep her alive while she learned to use the weapons her father had left her. You have enemies who don't yet know you exist, he explained, demonstrating the various safe rooms built into the estate. When they figure out James Voss's daughter is taking an active role in his empire, some will try to eliminate you immediately. Others will try to co-opt you. A few might even try legitimate alliance, but all of them will be probing for weakness. How do I avoid showing weakness? You don't avoid it. You control how it's perceived. Dmitri pulled up security footage showing the perimeter of the estate. Real weakness is being unprepared and showing it. Strategic weakness is appearing vulnerable while being completely protected. Your father mastered the art of seeming accessible while being untouchable. Alina studied the security measures, cameras, guards, systems that could lock down the estate in seconds. He lived like this for 30 years? Always watched? Always guarded? He lived like this because the alternative was being dead. Dmitri's expression softened slightly. But he also lived like this so you wouldn't have to. He wanted you to have a normal life, free from the paranoia that came with real power. Now that you've chosen this path, you'll need to find a balance. Protected enough to survive, but not so isolated that you lose perspective on the world you're trying to influence. Did you like him, my father? Dmitri considered the question. I respected him. He was fair, paid extremely well, and never asked me to do anything that violated my personal code. Toward the end, I think he was tired of the constant vigilance, the weight of all the secrets, the impossibility of trusting anyone completely. He was looking forward to retirement. He was going to retire? After Project Nightfall concluded, he was planning to transfer most of his operations to trusted lieutenants, keep a consulting role, and spend more time being a grandfather. Dmitri's jaw tightened. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier killed him before he could step away. Made sure his last major deal would be his death sentence. Alina felt rage crystallize into something cold and purposeful. Then we make sure they pay for it. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, but eventually. Eventually, Dmitri agreed. But first, you survive. Then you build strength. Then you move against enemies from a position they can't counter. Your father taught me patience, taught all of us that revenge rushed is revenge wasted. Margaret appeared in the doorway. She's agreed to meet. Alina turned. Victoria? Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. She thinks she's meeting a representative from her father's company to discuss due diligence on her engagement. She doesn't know you'll be there. Margaret's smile was predatory. I've arranged for the meeting to take place at the Cascade Club, private, exclusive, the kind of place where serious conversations happen without interruption. What do I say to her? The truth. All of it. Ethan's fraud, the debt, the pregnancy, the timing of everything. Let her draw her own conclusions about the man she's planning to marry. Margaret pulled up a file on her tablet. I've also prepared a package of documentation you can give her. Proof of everything you claim. Bank records, forged signatures, timeline of his affair while you were caring for your dying father. It's comprehensive and devastating. Alina took the tablet, scrolled through the evidence. Seeing it all laid out like this, the pattern of manipulation, the calculated cruelty, the sheer scope of Ethan's betrayal, she felt something shift inside her. The last lingering hope that maybe there'd been some misunderstanding, some explanation that could make sense of his actions, finally died. He planned this for months, she said quietly. Every step. The affair, the debt, the timing of the divorce announcement. He was just waiting for my father to die so there'd be no one to protect me. Yes, Margaret confirmed. Which means he's not just cruel. He's calculating. That makes him more dangerous, but also more predictable. Men who plan everything are often unprepared for chaos. And you, Alina, are about to become the chaos that destroys all his careful planning. The next afternoon, Alina dressed for battle in designer armor she'd found in the estate's closets, clothes her father had apparently kept on hand for occasions that required power dressing. A tailored charcoal suit that fit perfectly, heels that added 3 inches to her height, subtle jewelry that screamed old money. Margaret had arranged for a stylist to help with hair and makeup, transforming Alina from grieving widow to someone who looked like she'd been born commanding boardrooms. You look terrifying, Margaret said approvingly. Victoria won't know what hit her. The Cascade Club occupied the top floor of one of Seattle's oldest buildings, all dark wood and leather and the hushed atmosphere of institutional wealth. Dimitri drove, Margaret rode in the passenger seat, and Alina sat in the back reviewing her talking points and trying to calm the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. Remember, Margaret coached, you're not asking for anything, not apologizing, not pleading, not seeking her understanding. You're simply providing information and letting her make her own choices about what to do with it. And if she doesn't believe me, then you walk away knowing you tried, and we proceed with Plan B. Destroy Ethan through legal and financial channels without her cooperation. Margaret glanced back. But she'll believe you. The evidence is too strong, and Victoria Ashford is too smart to ignore facts just because they're inconvenient. They arrived 15 minutes early. The club's manager, clearly briefed by Margaret, showed them to a private room overlooking the Sound. The view was spectacular, the kind of backdrop that made people feel important just for being there. Alina stood by the windows, watching boats cut white trails across gray water. Behind her, Margaret arranged documents on the conference table. Dimitri waited outside, a visible presence that sent its own message about Alina's resources and seriousness. At precisely 3 o'clock, Victoria Ashford arrived. She was beautiful in the way people with money and time and personal trainers often were. Perfect posture, perfect skin, perfect everything. Blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, a cream suit that probably cost $5,000, the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly afraid of anything. She stopped when she saw Alina instead of whoever she'd been expecting. I'm sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I was supposed to meet with someone from... There's no mistake. Alina turned from the windows, letting Victoria see the full transformation. I'm Alina Voss, Ethan Cole's wife, and we need to talk about the man you're planning to marry. Victoria's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, calculation. This is highly inappropriate. I'm not discussing my personal life with my fiancé's soon-to-be ex-wife. Even if that ex-wife can prove your fiancé is a con artist who's been systematically committing fraud and is currently trying to bury his pregnant wife under debt so he can access your father's money. Alina's voice remained calm, professional. I think you'll want to hear what I have to say, unless you'd prefer to learn all this after the wedding. Victoria hesitated, her hand on the door. Margaret slid a folder across the table. Ms. Ashford, I'm Margaret Chow, attorney representing Miss Voss's interests. What we're about to show you is documented, verifiable evidence of criminal fraud. You're under no obligation to stay, but I suspect you'll regret leaving without seeing it. For a long moment, Victoria didn't move. Then slowly she walked to the table and opened the folder. Alina watched her face as she read, watched the moment understanding dawned, watched shock give way to anger, watched Victoria Ashford realize she'd been played just as thoroughly as Alina had been. These account numbers, Victoria said finally, her voice tight. He used her social security number to open 17 fraudulent accounts. Yes. Margaret pulled out more documentation. He's buried Ms. Voss in over $300,000 of debt, listed her as a co-signer on business ventures that are failing, and he did it all while having an affair with you and planning his exit strategy. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. The timeline. He started this before we even met. He married me for my father's connections, Alina said quietly. When those connections became less useful, he found someone with better resources. You. This isn't personal, Victoria. To Ethan, we're both just means to an end. Victoria looked up, her eyes sharp and assessing. If this is all true, why tell me? Why not just take him to court, destroy him legally? Because you deserve to know who you're marrying. Because I know what it feels like to discover the man you thought you knew is actually a stranger wearing a familiar face. Alina moved closer to the table. And because I think you're smarter than Ethan gives you credit for. He sees you as another useful asset, your father's money, your connections. I see you as someone who doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed by a man who views marriage as a business transaction. You're pregnant. 8 weeks. Victoria's expression cracked slightly. And he just left? Demanded a divorce the day you told him. 3 days after my father's funeral, in a lawyer's office. He told me the pregnancy was an unfortunate complication and offered me just enough money to keep me quiet until after your wedding. Alina's voice remained steady, but something raw flickered beneath it. I came here because I don't want you to experience what I experienced. Finding out too late that you've built your life around someone who never saw you as anything more than useful. Victoria was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder. Your father was James Voss. It wasn't a question, but Alina nodded anyway. I thought he was just a consultant, mid-level, decent connections, but nothing major. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Ethan said your father's death was sad, but wouldn't impact your financial situation significantly. Ethan was wrong about a lot of things. Alina met her gaze steadily. My father left me more than Ethan could comprehend, which means I don't need your father's money or your family's connections. I'm telling you this because it's the right thing to do, not because I need something from you. Victoria stood, walked to the windows, stared out at the water the way Alina had moments before. If I confront Ethan with this, he'll deny it. He'll say you're lying, that you're jealous, that you're trying to sabotage our relationship. He probably will, Margaret agreed. But Ms. Voss isn't asking you to confront him. She's providing you with information. What you do with it is entirely your choice. My father will have this verified, Victoria said quietly. He'll run his own investigation. If even half of this is true, it's all true, Alina interrupted. Every word, every document, every fraudulent account. I wish it wasn't. I wish the man I married had been who I thought he was. But wishing doesn't change facts. Victoria turned back, her expression unreadable. Why did you really come here, Alina? The truth. Alina considered lying, spinning some story about altruism or sisterhood, or wanting to protect Victoria from making her mistakes. But something about the woman in front of her, the sharp intelligence, the careful assessment, deserved honesty. Because I wanted you to see me, Alina said finally. The woman Ethan dismissed as irrelevant, the complication he thought he could bury with a settlement and a gag order. I wanted you to understand that I'm not going away quietly, and I'm not the helpless victim he described. And I wanted you to make your own choice about whether to tie your future to a man who sees people as transactions. Victoria studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone broken, desperate, begging me to give him up. Victoria's smile turned sharp. Ethan said you'd probably try to cause trouble, but that you didn't have the resources or the spine to be a real threat. Looking at you now, I'd say he was catastrophically wrong on both counts. He usually is. I need to think about this. Victoria picked up the folder. May I keep these documents? They're yours, Margaret said. Along with contact information if you need clarification on anything. Victoria nodded, moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. The baby. You're keeping it? Yes. And Ethan knows? Doesn't care? He offered me $50,000 for medical expenses and $2,000 a month in child support in exchange for minimal contact. Alina's hand found her stomach again. He was very clear that neither I nor the baby fit into his future plans. Something hardened in Victoria's expression. I see. She opened the door, paused one more time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry you married a man who turned out to be someone else. Sorry you had to come here and tell me all this. And sorry that my father's company is probably about to make Ethan's life very, very complicated. Then she was gone, heels clicking down the hallway like rifle shots. Margaret closed the door behind her. Well, That went better than expected. Alina sank into one of the leather chairs, adrenaline draining and leaving her shaky. You think she believed us? I think she believed the evidence. Whether she acts on it or tries to ignore it for the sake of her engagement remains to be seen. Margaret began gathering the remaining documents. But we've planted the seed, given her everything she needs to verify the truth. The rest is up to her. And if she chooses to stay with him anyway, then we proceed without her cooperation and destroy him through every legal and financial channel we have access to. Margaret's expression was matter of fact. But my guess, Victoria Ashford is too smart and too ambitious to tie herself to a sinking ship. Once her father verifies even half of what we showed her, Ethan won't just lose the engagement, he'll lose any chance of ever moving in their circles again. Dimitri appeared in the doorway. Ms. Ashford just left the building. She looked thoughtful. Thoughtful is good, Margaret said. Thoughtful means she's processing, taking it seriously. She turned to Alina. You did well. That took courage. It took anger. Alina stood, smoothed her suit. But you're right. It felt good. Felt like taking back some control. Welcome to power, Margaret said. It's addictive. Your father always said the hardest part wasn't gaining it. It was remembering why you wanted it in the first place and not letting it consume everything else. They drove back to the estate in contemplative silence. Alina watched the city slide past, thinking about Victoria's face as she'd read the evidence, thinking about Ethan's lies catching up to him, thinking about her father's empire and the choice she'd made to step fully into inheriting it. The rain had finally stopped. Thin sunlight broke through clouds, gilding the sound in shades of bronze and gold. Somewhere in this city, Ethan was probably planning his future, confident in his cleverness, certain he'd successfully upgraded from a wife who'd outlived her usefulness to one whose family connections would accelerate his ambitions. He had no idea that the woman he'd discarded was about to become the most dangerous person he'd ever underestimated. And that, Alina was learning, was exactly how power worked. The call came at 2 a.m, pulling Alina from restless sleep into the blue glow of her new secure phone. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. Victoria Ashford just fired her wedding planner, Margaret said without preamble. 10 minutes ago. Left a voicemail saying the December wedding is postponed indefinitely. Alina sat up in the unfamiliar bedroom of the estate, her heart hammering. She believed us. She did more than believe us. Her father's security team has been running enhanced background checks on Ethan for the last 18 hours. They found everything. The fraudulent accounts, the debt, business ventures that are actually money laundering schemes. Gerald Ashford is reportedly apoplectic. Margaret's voice carried grim satisfaction. Ethan's world is about to implode. How long before he knows? He probably already suspects something. Victoria hasn't answered his calls since yesterday afternoon. By morning, when Gerald's legal team starts serving subpoenas, he'll know for certain. A pause. The question is what he does next. Desperate men make unpredictable choices. You think he'll come after me? I think he'll try to figure out how his mediocre consultant's grieving widow suddenly has the resources to destroy his life, which means we need to be prepared for him to start digging into your father's estate. Margaret's tone shifted. Alina, there's something else. We've been monitoring communications from Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier. They're asking questions about James Voss's heir. Someone tipped them off that you're more than a grieving daughter. Ice crystallized in Alina's stomach. Who? We don't know yet. But the question started shortly after your meeting with Victoria. Either someone at the Cascade Club recognized you and made calls, or Victoria herself mentioned it to the wrong person. Margaret paused. This is what I warned you about. Stepping into visibility means everyone starts watching. Alina moved to the windows overlooking the sound. The water was black glass under a sliver moon, the city lights distant and cold. What do they know? That James Voss's daughter has retained high-level legal counsel, that she's no longer living at her marital residence, that she's made contact with Victoria Ashford and somehow convinced her to postpone a wedding that was supposed to cement a major business alliance. Margaret's voice carried a note of warning. They're trying to assess whether you're a threat or an opportunity. We need to control that narrative before they control it for us. How? by announcing your presence on our terms, making it clear you're not hiding, not vulnerable, and not someone they can easily eliminate or co-opt. Margaret paused. There's a charity gala in 3 days. The winter benefit at the Sheraton Grand. Every major player in Seattle will be there. Tech executives, real estate moguls, politicians, old money and new. Your father attended every year. His absence this year will be noted. You want me to go? I want you to make an entrance that makes everyone in that room reassess their assumptions about James Voss's daughter. I want you to walk in looking powerful, confident, and completely in control of your father's legacy. I want Chen's people and Volkov's people and Pelletier's people to see you and understand that eliminating you would be costly and complicated. Alina's reflection stared back at her from the dark window, a woman who looked nothing like the person she'd been a week ago. What about Ethan? He'll be there with Victoria. Victoria won't attend with him. Not after tonight. But yes, Ethan will likely be there. He'll be desperate, cornered, looking for any way to salvage his reputation and his engagement. Margaret's smile was audible, which means he'll see you transformed, see you commanding a room he thought he'd never see you in, see you becoming everything he dismissed as impossible. I'm not ready for this. You'll never feel ready. That's not how power works. You take it before you're ready and learn to wield it while everyone's watching. Margaret's voice gentled slightly. But you won't be alone. Dmitri will handle security. I'll handle the political navigation. David will make sure you understand who everyone is and what they want. And you'll handle the performance, being exactly who you need to be to survive this. Alina thought about her father's video message, about becoming someone powerful enough to protect what she loved, about the child growing inside her who would inherit whatever world she built. 3 days, she said quietly. That's not much time to learn how to convince a room full of dangerous people that I'm one of them. You've already convinced Victoria Ashford, and she's one of the smartest players in her generation. You've dismantled Ethan's carefully constructed life in less than a week. You've stepped into your father's empire and started making decisions that are already reshaping power dynamics. Margaret paused. Alina, you're more ready than you think. You just need to believe it. After Margaret hung up, Alina stood at the windows for a long time, watching the city sleep. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably just realizing his world was collapsing. Somewhere, Chen and Volkov and Pelletier were calculating whether James Voss's daughter was worth eliminating or recruiting. Somewhere, her father's legacy waited for her to prove she was worthy of inheriting it. 3 days. 72 hours to transform from a woman learning to survive into someone who could command a room full of predators. She placed one hand on her stomach, that protective gesture becoming habit. Your mother is about to do something terrifying, she whispered to the life growing there. Try not to judge her too harshly. The next morning, Margaret arrived with a team that turned the estate's formal dining room into a war room. Maps of the Sheraton Grand's ballroom covered one wall. Photographs of key players covered another. A third wall tracked Ethan's unraveling in real-time updates that would have been impressive if they weren't so devastating. Gerald Ashford's legal team filed a fraud complaint with the FBI this morning, David reported, updating the timeline. Ethan's business accounts have been frozen. His passport has been flagged. And Victoria released a statement through her publicist, saying the engagement is off due to irreconcilable differences. How is Ethan responding? Alina studied the photographs. Chen Wei, severe and calculating. Dmitri Volkov, expansive and dangerous. Marcus Pelletier, refined and lethal. Her father's killers, reduced to headshots on a wall. Radio silence so far. He's lawyered up. Richard Bronson, expensive but not particularly creative. My guess is Bronson's advising him to keep quiet while they assess the damage. David pulled up another screen. But there's chatter. Ethan's been calling everyone he knows, trying to understand what happened. He knows someone with serious resources moved against him. He just doesn't know who yet. Let him wonder, Margaret said. Uncertainty is useful, makes him more likely to make mistakes. She turned to Alina. We need to discuss your positioning for the gala. Your father attended these events as a consultant and fixer, present but not prominent. You need to attend as something different. As what? As James Voss's heir. As someone who controls billions in assets and 3 decades of accumulated leverage. as someone these people need to take seriously. Margaret pulled up a seating chart of the ballroom. We've secured a table in the center section, visible but not ostentatious. You'll be seated with allies we've cultivated, tech executives who benefited from your father's connections, a state senator whose campaign your father funded, a philanthropist whose foundation your father supported. People who owe me. People who understand the value of maintaining relationships with powerful allies. Margaret's correction was gentle but firm. This isn't about collecting debts. It's about demonstrating you understand how your father's network functions and you're capable of maintaining it. Dmitri entered carrying a tablet. We have a problem. Ethan just showed up at your old apartment building. Security footage shows him trying to access your unit. Alina moved to look at the footage. There was Ethan, looking haggard and desperate, arguing with the building manager. Even through the silent security feed, his agitation was visible. He's looking for answers, Margaret observed, probably hoping to find something in your belongings that explains how you suddenly have the resources to destroy him. There's nothing there, Alina said. I left with almost nothing, which will make him more paranoid, more desperate. Margaret made a note on her tablet. We should expect him to try other approaches. He might attempt to contact you directly, might try to leverage your shared history, appeal to whatever feelings you once had for him. I don't have feelings for him anymore, just clarity about who he really is. Good. Because he'll try every manipulation he knows, remorse, anger, threats, promises, whatever he thinks might work. Margaret looked up. The important thing is that you don't engage. Don't answer calls. Don't respond to messages. Every interaction gives him information and opportunity. Your silence is more powerful than anything you could say. Over the next 2 days, Alina absorbed everything Margaret and David could teach her about the players who would attend the gala. Chenwei controlled rare earth mining operations across Southeast Asia, his wealth measured in strategic resources rather than currency. Dmitry Volkov had fingers in energy, real estate, and legitimate businesses that laundered money for half of Russia's oligarch class. Marcus Pelletier moved weapons to anyone with money and few questions, operating behind a facade of respectable international trading companies. Your father knew all their secrets, Margaret explained, pulling up encrypted files. Chen's mines use forced labor. Volkov's real estate empire is built on seized properties and murdered competitors. Pelletier's weapons have fueled 3 civil wars and counting. That's why they killed him. He threatened to expose all of it unless they cleaned up their trafficking operations. Why did he care about the trafficking? Alina studied the evidence her father had compiled. He wasn't exactly a moral crusader. No, but he had lines he wouldn't cross. Children were one of them. Human trafficking, especially of minors, your father considered that beyond the pale. Margaret's expression softened. He once told me he couldn't look at you, and then look at intelligence reports about trafficked children without feeling physically ill. Said if he was going to wield power, he was going to use it to protect the one thing that should be sacred. Alina thought about her father, complicated, compromised, capable of both ruthless pragmatism and surprising principle. He was trying to be good within a system that rewards being terrible. And it killed him, Margaret said quietly, which is why we need to be smarter. Use his leverage to protect ourselves while we build something more sustainable. Your father tried to force change through threats. We need to incentivize change through making the right choice also the profitable choice. That's a longer game. Yes, which means we need to survive the short game first. Margaret pulled up a profile of someone new, a woman, elegant and severe, with eyes that suggested she missed nothing. This is Eleanor Thorne. She'll be at the gala. Your father worked with her occasionally. She's an information broker, neutral party who sells intelligence to whoever pays best. Why do I need to know about her? Because she's probably been hired to assess you, figure out what you know, what you're capable of, whether you're continuing your father's operations or liquidating everything. Margaret zoomed in on Eleanor's dossier. She's brilliant, dangerous, and will try to extract information from you while appearing to make polite conversation. Don't underestimate her. How do I handle her? Give her just enough truth to be interesting, but not enough to be useful. She respects people who can hold their own in verbal chess matches. Disappoint her, and she'll dismiss you. Impress her, and she might become an ally. Margaret smiled. Your father once told me that Eleanor was the only person who scared him because she was smarter than he was and had fewer scruples about what she'd do with information. The day before the gala, a delivery arrived at the estate. A dress box from a boutique Alina had never heard of, but Margaret clearly recognized. Inside, midnight blue silk that seemed to absorb light, cut to suggest power rather than seduction. Understated jewelry that probably cost more than Alina's car. Shoes that added height without sacrificing the ability to run if necessary. Your father had this made 6 months ago, Margaret said, watching Alina examine the dress. He was planning for this moment, for you stepping into his world. He wanted you to have armor that looked like elegance. Alina held the dress up to the light, watched colors shift in the silk. He really believed I could do this. He knew you could. The question was always whether you'd choose to. Margaret's expression turned serious. Tomorrow night, you'll walk into a room full of people who knew your father. Some respected him, some feared him, some hated him. All of them will be evaluating you, trying to understand if you're a continuation of his legacy or a weak point they can exploit. No pressure. Immense pressure. But you've handled everything else that's been thrown at you this week. This is just another challenge. Margaret moved toward the door, paused. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early. We have meetings before the gala. People who want preliminary conversations, assessments, deals. You'll need to be sharp. That night, Alina dreamed of her father. Not as she'd last seen him, wasted by poison in a hospital bed, but vital and alive, standing in this same estate. In the dream, he was proud but worried, the way he'd looked at her college graduation, pleased with who she'd become, but concerned about what came next. You're doing well, Dream Father said. Better than I expected, but Alina, be careful. Power changes people, makes them forget who they were before they had it. Promise me you won't lose yourself in this. I promise, Dream Alina said. But Dad, how do I know if I'm using power or if it's using me? If you have to ask, you're probably still okay. It's when you stop asking that you've gone too far. He smiled, the expression sad and knowing. I stopped asking years ago. Don't make my mistakes, sweetheart. Be powerful, yes, but be better than I was. She woke with tears on her face and a clarity that felt like benediction. Her father had given her weapons. It was up to her to decide how to use them without becoming the kind of person who needed killing. The morning of the gala arrived with slate-gray skies and the smell of rain. Margaret orchestrated the day with military precision. Breakfast briefing at 7, security review at 8, preliminary meeting starting at 9 and running until 3. Alina met with a tech CEO who wanted to discuss continuing a consulting arrangement her father had maintained. Met with a real estate developer seeking guidance on a project that had suddenly hit regulatory obstacles. Met with a venture capitalist who wanted to know if certain introductions her father had facilitated would continue. Each meeting was a test. Each person trying to assess whether Alina was someone worth cultivating or someone to abandon now that her father was gone. She felt like she was performing multiple roles simultaneously: confident heir, shrewd negotiator, person who definitely knew what she was doing and wasn't screaming internally. You're a natural, David said after the venture capitalist left. You have your father's gift for making people feel heard while giving away nothing of substance. I feel like I'm drowning and pretending I can swim. That's what everyone feels in this world. The difference is you're actually swimming. Most people just flail dramatically while sinking. He checked his watch. 2 hours until we need to leave for the gala. Margaret wants you to rest, review the key players one more time, and eat something substantial. You'll be on your feet for hours once we get there. Alina retreated to her room, but rest felt impossible. Adrenaline thrummed through her veins, sharpening everything to hyperclarity. She reviewed the profiles again. Faces, names, connections, the careful web her father had spent 30 years weaving. Somewhere in that web were the people who'd killed him. Somewhere in that ballroom tonight, his murderers would be drinking champagne and making small talk, confident they'd gotten away with it. The dress fit perfectly, as if her father had somehow known exactly who she'd become. The jewelry caught light and threw it back like captured stars. Alina studied herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. A week ago, she'd been someone small and grieving and alone. Tonight, she looked like someone who could command armies. Margaret appeared in the doorway, elegant in charcoal gray. You look perfect. Powerful, but not threatening. Wealthy, but not ostentatious. Exactly what we need. I feel like an imposter. Everyone does. The trick is remembering that everyone else feels that way too. They're just better at hiding it. Margaret handed her a small clutch. Inside is your phone, identification, and your legal name, and a panic button that alerts Dimitri if you need immediate extraction. I'll be watching from across the room. David will be circulating, feeding you information through an earpiece we'll place once we're in the car. You won't be alone. Dimitri drove them in a different car tonight, a midnight black Bentley that suggested serious money without screaming about it. The drive to the Sheraton Grand took 20 minutes through evening traffic. Alina watched Seattle slide past, the city transformed by twilight into something glamorous and dangerous. Chenwei arrived 30 minutes ago. David's voice came through the earpiece, startling Alina. He's positioned himself near the bar with sightlines to both entrances. Volkov is running late but confirmed attendance. Pelletier's already inside, circulating. All three know you're expected. What about Ethan? No sign of him yet, but the night is young. David's tone suggested he was looking forward to whatever happened when Ethan saw Alina's transformation. The Sheraton Grand's ballroom was everything Alina expected. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, 500 people dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's cars. A string quartet played something classical and sophisticated. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes that were probably more art than food. Alina stepped into the room on Margaret's arm, and something rippled through the crowd. Not silence, too many people, too much ambient noise, but a shift in attention, heads turning, conversations pausing mid-sentence. The daughter of James Voss, returned from mourning and impossibly transformed. Eleanor Thorne, at 10 o'clock, David murmured in her ear. She's moving toward you. Remember, give her nothing useful. Eleanor materialized from the crowd like smoke becoming solid. Up close, she was even more striking than her photographs. Silver hair cut sharp as a blade, a black dress that probably cost more than a semester of college, eyes that cataloged everything and revealed nothing. You must be Alina Voss, Eleanor said, her voice carrying the faint trace of a British accent. Your father spoke of you often, always with great pride and some concern. Ms. Thorne, Alina accepted the offered handshake. My father mentioned you as well, said you were the only person in his world who frightened him. Eleanor's smile was genuine, pleased. Did he? How flattering. I always wondered if he found me threatening or merely inconvenient. Her gaze sharpened, assessing. You're not what I expected. The intelligence suggested you'd be overwhelmed, possibly medicated. Certainly not commanding a room like you were born to it. Intelligence is only as good as the assumptions behind it. Perhaps whoever briefed you underestimated how well my father prepared me for inheriting his world. Alina sipped champagne she had no intention of drinking. Or perhaps they wanted you to underestimate me. Information brokers can be manipulated too. Eleanor laughed, the sound sharp and delighted. Oh, I like you. Your father would be pleased. He was always worried you were too kind for this business. Seems he needn't have concerned himself. She leaned closer, conspiratorial. Between us, several interested parties have asked me to assess whether you're continuing your father's operations or liquidating. I assume you'll give me nothing definitive to report. I assume you'll report whatever serves your interests, regardless of what I say. That's what my father paid you for, truth when it was convenient, fiction when it was necessary, and the wisdom to know which situation required which response. Your father taught you well. Eleanor's expression turned serious. There are people in this room who would prefer you didn't exist, others who want to recruit you, a few who are still trying to figure out which category you belong in. The next few hours will determine which camp wins. Any advice? Don't appear weak. Don't appear too strong. Walk the line between untouchable and approachable. And whatever you do, don't let them see you sweat. Eleanor glanced across the room. Chenwei is watching you, has been since you entered. He's trying to decide if you know he killed your father. Alina's blood froze. Do you know if he did? I know he had motive, means, and opportunity. I know the ricin came from a source he's used before. I know he met with Volkov and Pelletier in Singapore 2 days before your father died. Eleanor's voice dropped. What I don't know is whether you have proof, a plan, or simply a desire for revenge. Be careful, Alina. Chen is brilliant and paranoid. If he decides you're a threat, he won't hesitate to eliminate you. Then I'll need to convince him I'm more valuable alive than dead. Now you're thinking like your father. Eleanor squeezed Alina's arm, the gesture almost affectionate. Survive tonight. We'll talk again when you're ready to make real moves. I have information your father paid for but never received. Consider it a legacy gift. She disappeared back into the crowd, leaving Alina standing with Margaret, who'd witnessed the entire exchange with visible approval. Well handled, Margaret murmured. Eleanor doesn't offer gifts. She's invested in you succeeding. That's useful. Chen Wei is watching, Alina said quietly. I know. He's been watching since you arrived. Let him watch. Let him see you comfortable, confident, surrounded by allies. Let him wonder what you know and what you're planning. Margaret guided Alina toward their table. The state senator is here. She's an ally. Genuinely liked your father. Let's make introductions. The next hour passed in a blur of careful conversations and strategic positioning. Alina met senators and executives, philanthropists, and power brokers. Each interaction was a performance, showing enough capability to be respected, enough humility to avoid threatening people unnecessarily. She felt David's voice in her ear feeding her information, Margaret's presence at her elbow providing silent support, Dimitri's watchful eyes tracking threats from across the room. And through it all, Chen Wei watched. He was exactly as his photograph suggested. Severe, calculating, the kind of man who'd built an empire by seeing opportunities others missed and exploiting them ruthlessly. He stood near the bar, champagne untouched, dark eyes following Alina's progress through the room. He's going to approach, David warned. Dimitri's moving closer. Don't be alone with him. But Margaret had already positioned them near a group of tech executives, ensuring any conversation would have witnesses. When Chen Wei finally moved, it was with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Ms. Voss. His accent was faint, his English perfect. I knew your father. He was a formidable man. Please accept my condolences on your loss. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Alina met his gaze steadily. My father spoke of you, said you were one of the most strategically minded people he'd ever negotiated with. Your father was generous in his assessments. Chen's expression revealed nothing. I understand you've inherited his estate. That's a significant responsibility for someone so young. My father wouldn't have left it to me if he didn't believe I could handle it. Alina kept her voice pleasant, giving away nothing. I'm discovering he prepared me better than I realized. Preparation is valuable. Experience more so. Chen sipped his champagne, a calculated gesture. Your father and I had ongoing discussions about certain business arrangements. I'd be interested in continuing those conversations with you. What kind of arrangements? Strategic partnerships, resource sharing, the kind of mutually beneficial relationships that make everyone wealthier and safer. Chen's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your father understood that in our world, alliances are everything, enemies are expensive, friends are profitable. My father also understood that some friendships cost more than they're worth, that some alliances require compromises that can't be unmade. Alina held his gaze. I'm still learning which relationships to maintain and which to renegotiate. Something flickered in Chen's expression. Calculation. Reassessment. A wise approach. Your father would approve of such caution. He glanced at Margaret, then back to Alina. I look forward to future conversations. When you've completed your evaluation of your inheritance, please contact me. I suspect we have much to discuss. He melted back into the crowd, leaving Alina's heart hammering against her ribs. Well done, Margaret murmured. You just told one of your father's killers that you're not making any moves until you understand the full picture. That buys you time. He killed my father, and I just had polite conversation with him. Alina's voice shook slightly. You survived an encounter with a man who's killed for less than the secrets your father kept. You held your ground, revealed nothing, and bought yourself breathing room. Margaret's grip on Alina's arm tightened slightly. This is the world you've inherited. Pleasantries exchanged with murderers, alliances with people you'd like to destroy. Welcome to your father's legacy. Before Alina could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd, heads turning, conversations stopping. And there, making his way across the ballroom with the desperate energy of a drowning man, was Ethan Cole. He looked terrible, suit rumpled, face haggard, eyes wild with something between rage and panic. Security was already moving toward him, but he'd spotted Alina across the room and was heading straight for her with single-minded determination. "Alina!" His voice carried over the string quartet, over the ambient conversation. "Alina, we need to talk. Now." Margaret stepped between them, but Ethan pushed past her, grabbing Alina's arm. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" "Victoria called off the engagement. The FBI is investigating me. My accounts are frozen." Dmitri materialized from nowhere, his hand on Ethan's shoulder with enough pressure to make him release Alina's arm. "Remove your hand, or I'll remove it for you," Dmitri said quietly. Ethan stumbled back, looking between Alina and Dmitri and Margaret, seeing for the first time the infrastructure that surrounded her. "Who are these people? How do you afford—" Understanding dawned, ugly and disbelieving. "Your father, the consultant. He wasn't really a consultant, was he?" "No," Alina said quietly, aware of the audience they'd drawn. "He wasn't. And the wife you dismissed as irrelevant? She isn't either." "You destroyed my life." Ethan's voice cracked. "Everything I built, everything I worked for, everything you stole, you mean, every fraudulent account, every piece of debt you buried me under, every lie you told Victoria about who I was and what I'd do." Alina's voice remained calm, clinical. "I didn't destroy your life, Ethan. I just made sure everyone could see what you'd built it on. I loved you." The words came out desperate, grasping. "We were happy. We could be happy again. Just call off whatever you've started. Fix this. You loved what I could give you. My father's connections, a cover for your fraud, someone naive enough to not question the debt appearing in my name." Alina felt the weight of 500 people watching, listening. Let them watch. Let them see. "You dismissed our child as a complication. You walked out 3 days after my father's funeral. You used me and threw me away when you found someone more useful. I made mistakes. I know that now. But, Alina, please." Ethan reached for her again. Dimitri's hand caught his wrist. "Don't." Security had arrived, 2 large men in suits who'd clearly been briefed. They moved to flank Ethan, not quite touching him, but making their presence known. "Mr. Cole," one of them said quietly, "you need to leave now." "This isn't over," Ethan said, looking at Alina with something between hatred and disbelief. "Whatever you think you've won, it's not over. I'll fight this. I'll prove you manipulated everything. You'll do nothing," Margaret interrupted, her voice carrying steel. "Because if you continue harassing Miss Voss, if you make any attempt to contact her, if you so much as think about her in a threatening manner, I will ensure the FBI investigation expands to include every questionable business dealing you've ever been involved in. And Mr. Cole, there are a lot of those." Security was already moving Ethan toward the exit, his protests fading into the ambient noise of the ballroom. Alina stood surrounded by Margaret, Dmitri, and a circle of witnesses who'd just seen her ex-husband's desperate confrontation and her cool, collected response. The string quartet resumed playing, conversations restarted. The moment passed into gossip that would circulate for weeks. Eleanor Thorne appeared at Alina's elbow. That was unfortunate timing, or perhaps perfect timing, depending on your perspective. She studied Alina's expression. "Everyone in this room now knows you're not someone to dismiss. Your ex-husband's very public desperation just demonstrated the cost of underestimating you. Nicely played." "I didn't plan that." "The best demonstrations rarely are planned. They're simply true." Eleanor glanced toward where Chen Wei was watching from across the room. "Chen looks thoughtful. He's reassessing his initial evaluation." "Good. Let him wonder what else he's gotten wrong about you." The rest of the evening passed in a strange, heightened state. Alina made conversation, accepted condolences about her father, deflected questions about her plans with practiced vagueness. But underneath every interaction, she felt the shift that had occurred. These people had watched her face down her desperate ex-husband, had seen her flanked by serious security and high-powered counsel, had witnessed her transformation from grieving daughter to someone who wielded power with casual precision. By the time they left at midnight, Alina's feet ached and her face hurt from maintaining pleasant expressions. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd succeeded. Had walked into a room full of predators and walked out having convinced them she was one too. In the Bentley heading back to the estate, Margaret allowed herself a satisfied smile. You did exceptionally well tonight. Better than I expected, honestly. I thought I was going to throw up during the conversation with Chen. But you didn't. You held your ground, revealed nothing, and bought yourself time. Margaret scrolled through her phone. We're already getting responses, 3 requests for meetings, 2 invitations to exclusive events, and 1 very interesting proposal from Eleanor Thorne. What kind of proposal? She wants to discuss purchasing some of your father's intelligence archives. Says there's information he gathered she'd pay premium prices for. Margaret looked up. It's worth considering. Selling intelligence we don't need generates capital while building relationships with neutral brokers like Eleanor. Alina leaned back against leather that smelled like wealth and power and her father's last gifts. A week ago, I was signing divorce papers. Tonight I negotiated with arms dealers and information brokers. Tomorrow I'll apparently be selling intelligence archives. This is insane. This is your life now, Margaret said simply. The question is whether you're going to keep treating it like something temporary or accept that you've permanently changed. Through the Bentley's windows, Seattle slid past in ribbons of light. Somewhere in this city, Ethan was probably drinking himself into oblivion, trying to understand how his careful plans had exploded so spectacularly. Somewhere, Chenwei was reassessing whether James Voss's daughter was a threat worth eliminating. Somewhere, her father's legacy waited for her to decide what to do with it. Alina placed one hand on her stomach, feeling nothing yet, but knowing the life growing there would inherit whatever world she built. I'm not treating this as temporary anymore, she said quietly. I'm treating it as the beginning of something my father started but couldn't finish. Something cleaner. Something I can explain to my child someday without shame. Margaret nodded slowly. Then we have work to do. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier need to be neutralized. Your father's legitimate operations need to be stabilized and grown. The leverage he accumulated needs to be converted into sustainable relationships, and you need to build a life that's more than just surviving threats and managing crises. One step at a time. One step at a time, Margaret agreed. But Alina, tonight you took a very big step. You claimed your inheritance publicly, demonstrated you're not hiding, showed everyone watching that underestimating you is costly. Whatever comes next, you did that. You made them see you. The estate appeared ahead, lit up against the night sky like a fortress. Alina's fortress now. Her father's gift and burden and trust all rolled into one impossible legacy. She'd survived her first real test, had walked into a room full of dangerous people and walked out having convinced them she belonged there. Tomorrow she'd start learning how to build something worth belonging to. Tonight she let herself feel the exhausted triumph of having made it through, of having become for one evening exactly what her father had believed she could be: powerful, dangerous, untouchable, and just beginning to understand what that meant. The morning after the gala, Alina woke to find Margaret already in the estate's study, 3 laptops open and a tablet streaming what appeared to be international news feeds. The older woman looked up when Alina entered, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and concern. You're trending, Margaret said without preamble. Not by name, thank goodness, but the business intelligence networks are buzzing about James Voss's heir making her debut. Several sources are calling you the widow, which is both inaccurate and slightly ominous. Alina poured coffee from the carafe Dmitri had thoughtfully left warming. What are they saying? That you're more formidable than expected. That your ex-husband's very public meltdown suggests you have resources and reach nobody anticipated. That Chenwei spent 20 minutes in conversation with you and walked away looking thoughtful rather than dismissive. Margaret pulled up a screen. Eleanor Thorne published a brief assessment in her morning intelligence briefing. Listen to this. James Voss's daughter possesses her father's strategic mind wrapped in a presentation that suggests vulnerability while demonstrating control. Underestimate at your own peril. That's high praise from Eleanor. Or a warning to her clients that I'm dangerous. Both. Eleanor deals in truth, and the truth is you impressed her last night. She doesn't impress easily. Margaret closed the laptop. But we have more immediate concerns. Dmitry Volkov wants a meeting. So does Marcus Pelletier. Both sent requests through intermediaries this morning. Alina set down her coffee cup carefully. The other two who killed my father. Yes, they're trying to assess whether you know what they did and whether you're planning retaliation. This is delicate, Alina. We need to convince them you're focused on building your inheritance, not avenging your father. Margaret paused. At least until we're strong enough to move against them safely. When will that be? Honestly, years, maybe never. They're too powerful, too insulated. Your father spent 3 decades accumulating leverage and he still couldn't touch them without risking everything. Margaret's expression turned gentle. I know you want justice, but sometimes survival is the only justice we get. Alina thought about her father's video message, about the baby growing inside her, about building something clean enough to explain without shame. What if we don't try to destroy them directly? What if we make them destroy each other? Margaret went very still. Explain. My father had leverage on all three. Evidence of their crimes, documentation of their trafficking operations. What if we leaked that information selectively? Made each of them think the others were about to be exposed? Created enough paranoia and distrust that they turn on each other? Alina moved to the windows overlooking the sound. They killed my father because they couldn't trust him to keep their secrets. What if we make them unable to trust each other? That's, Margaret paused, considering. That's actually brilliant. Risky, but brilliant. Your father tried to force them to change through threats. You're suggesting we destabilize their alliance by exploiting the same paranoia that made them kill him. Can it work? Possibly. They're already suspicious of each other. That's the nature of partnerships built on mutual leverage rather than mutual trust. If we feed them information suggesting one of them is cooperating with authorities, or planning to eliminate the others, or secretly trying to seize control. Margaret pulled out her tablet, already making notes. It would take careful orchestration, precise timing, intelligence planted where they'd find it, but not so obviously that they'd suspect manipulation. Eleanor could help with that. She's a neutral broker. If intelligence appeared to come through her network, she'd never do it. Too risky. Her entire business model depends on neutrality and discretion. Margaret looked up. But she might sell us the infrastructure to do it ourselves, for the right price. A soft knock interrupted them. David entered carrying a folder. Ms. Voss, we have a situation. Ethan Cole was arrested this morning. FBI picked him up at his apartment. The charges include wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Alina felt something twist in her chest. Not sympathy, she was long past that, but a strange recognition that the man she'd once loved was now facing consequences that would reshape his entire life. How long will he be in custody? Bail hearing is this afternoon. His lawyer will argue he's not a flight risk, but given the passport flag and the severity of the charges, David shrugged. Could go either way. Margaret's contacts in the prosecutor's office say they have a strong case. Multiple victims beyond you, pattern of behavior going back 5 years. I'm not his only victim? Not even close. Turns out Ethan's been running variations of this scheme since college. You're just the most recent. David pulled out documents. 2 previous relationships where he used his partner's identity for fraudulent accounts. 1 business partner he defrauded out of $200,000. A pattern of finding people with resources or connections, extracting what he needed, and discarding them. Alina sat down heavily. I was just another mark. A particularly useful one, yes. Your father's connections, your naivete, your trust. Ethan exploited all of it. Margaret's voice carried unusual gentleness. I know that's hard to hear, but understanding what he is makes it easier to let go of who you thought he was. I don't feel anything for him anymore. Just anger that I wasted 3 years on someone so fundamentally hollow. Alina looked up. Will he go to prison? Almost certainly. The evidence is overwhelming, and the FBI is treating this as part of a larger investigation into financial fraud schemes. David checked his notes. His lawyer might negotiate a plea deal, but even that would involve significant prison time. Ethan Cole's life as he knew it is over. There should have been satisfaction in that. Should have been vindication. Instead, Alina felt only a tired recognition that destroying Ethan hadn't filled the hole his betrayal had created. It had simply made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt her. What about Victoria? Alina asked. How is she handling this? She released a statement through her publicist yesterday, very carefully worded, expressing shock at the allegations, gratitude that the truth came out before the wedding, and commitment to cooperating with authorities. Margaret pulled up the statement. Between us, Gerald Ashford is furious, not at Victoria, at himself for not vetting Ethan more carefully. He's apparently implementing new background check protocols for anyone who comes near his daughter or his business. At least something good came from this mess. More than something. You saved Victoria from making a catastrophic mistake. You exposed a serial con artist, and you demonstrated to everyone watching that crossing you has consequences. Margaret closed her tablet. Now we need to decide how to handle Volkov and Pelletier's meeting requests. Accept both, but separately and on our terms. Alina stood, moved back to the windows. I want to meet them where my father met them, on neutral ground where they feel secure enough to reveal what they're really after. That's dangerous. Meeting your father's killers face to face is exactly what they'll expect me to be too afraid to do, which means doing it demonstrates strength. Alina turned back to Margaret. You said the key to survival is appearing strong enough to be costly to attack, but not so threatening they have no choice but to move against me. Meeting them shows confidence. Refusing suggests fear. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Your father would have made the same calculation. He'd also have brought significant security and had multiple exit strategies prepared. Then that's what we'll do. Set up the meetings. Make sure Dmitri has people everywhere. And let's see what Volkov and Pelletier are really after. Over the next week, Alina's life became a masterclass in strategic deception and careful power plays. Margaret arranged the meetings, Volkov first, at an exclusive restaurant where he owned a private dining room, then Pelletier 3 days later at a gallery opening where business could be discussed under the guise of admiring art. But before either meeting, something unexpected happened. Eleanor Thorne called requesting an urgent conversation. They met at the Cascade Club again, the same private room where Alina had confronted Victoria. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio that suggested serious business. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, Eleanor said, accepting coffee Alina had ordered in advance. I have information your father paid for but never received. Given recent events, I thought you should have it sooner rather than later. What kind of information? Eleanor opened the portfolio, pulled out a thick folder. Complete financial records for all 3 men who met with your father in Singapore. Chen, Volkov, Pelletier. Your father commissioned a deep investigation into their trafficking operations, routes, financials, the entire infrastructure. He was building a case to force them to shut it down or face exposure. Alina's hands trembled slightly as she took the folder. This is what got him killed. Yes, and it's also the weapon he intended to use against them. I'm giving it to you because I believe you'll use it more wisely than he did. Eleanor's expression turned serious. Your father tried to force change through threats. He was morally right but strategically foolish. You can't threaten men like Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier and expect them to simply comply. They kill threats. It's what they do. So what do I do with this? You use it the way you use the information about Ethan, strategically, carefully, with an eye toward outcomes rather than revenge. Eleanor sipped her coffee. Your father wanted to expose them all at once, force them to shut down their trafficking operations through fear of prosecution. That was never going to work. But selective exposure? Information leaked to the right authorities at the right time? Creating problems that force them to allocate resources defending themselves rather than attacking you? That might work. You're helping me plan how to move against men who are probably your clients. I'm helping you survive men who killed your father and would kill you without hesitation if they decided you were a threat. Eleanor's voice carried absolute certainty. I liked James Voss, respected him. His death was unnecessary and wasteful. If giving you the tools to protect yourself also happens to complicate life for his killers, I can live with that. What's your price? Access. When you build whatever you're building, and I can see you're building something, I want to be part of your intelligence network, not as a vendor, as a partner. Eleanor leaned forward. Your father's model was transactional. You pay, I provide. I'm proposing something different. Shared intelligence, mutual benefit, genuine alliance. Why? Because I'm 63 years old and tired of selling information to people who use it to hurt others. Your father at least had principles, lines he wouldn't cross. Most of my clients have no such constraints. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. You're trying to build something better. I'd like to help. Consider it legacy planning. Alina studied the woman across from her, calculating, dangerous, offering alliance with the same cool precision she'd probably use to broker deals between arms dealers and dictators. My father trusted you. Your father used me. Trust is different, but I never betrayed him, never sold his secrets to his enemies, never did anything that would compromise his operations. Eleanor's gaze was steady. I'm offering you the same loyalty I gave him, with the added benefit that I actually like you. I'll need to think about it. Of course. Take the folder. Study what your father learned. When you're ready to discuss how to use it, call me. Eleanor stood, gathered her things. And Alina? Be careful with Volkov and Pelletier. They're meeting with you to assess whether you know they killed your father. Don't let them see that you do. Not yet. Not until you're ready to move. After Eleanor left, Alina sat alone in the private room studying the documents her father had died gathering. The trafficking routes were extensive, Southeast Asia to Eastern Europe, Africa to South America. Thousands of people moved like cargo through networks Chen controlled, Volkov protected, and Pelletier armed. The financial records showed billions flowing through shell companies and legitimate businesses designed to launder money and obscure the source. Her father had wanted to stop this, had threatened to expose it all unless they cleaned up their operations. And they'd killed him for it rather than risk exposure. Alina placed one hand on her stomach, that protective gesture becoming more frequent as the pregnancy progressed. The child growing inside her would inherit whatever world she built. Whatever choices she made now would ripple forward into their life. She could destroy these men, could leak the evidence to international authorities, trigger investigations that would tie them up for years. But Eleanor was right. They'd survived exposure before. They had lawyers and politicians and enough money to make problems disappear. Exposure might slow them down, but it wouldn't stop them, unless she was smarter about it, unless she used her father's evidence the way she'd used the evidence against Ethan, precisely, strategically, with clear objectives rather than blind revenge. The meeting with Dmitry Volkov happened on a gray Thursday afternoon at his restaurant, an establishment that served Russian cuisine to tech executives who thought eating borscht made them sophisticated. The private dining room was elegant in the way massive wealth often was, understated but expensive, every detail suggesting serious money. Volkov himself was larger than life, 6'4", broad shoulders, the kind of presence that commanded space simply by existing. He stood when Alina entered, Dmitry close behind her and two of his security team positioned outside. Ms. Voss, thank you for meeting with me. Volkov's accent was heavy, his English careful. Please, sit. I have ordered lunch. I hope you enjoy Russian food. I'm pregnant, Mr. Volkov. My relationship with food is complicated at the moment. Alina sat across from him, maintaining eye contact. But I appreciate the gesture. Pregnant. Volkov's expression brightened with what seemed like genuine pleasure. Congratulations. Your father would have been delighted to be a grandfather. He would have been. Unfortunately, he died before I could tell him. Alina kept her voice neutral, giving away nothing. Volkov's expression shifted to practiced sympathy. Your father was a good man, a smart man. His death was a tragedy. A tragedy caused by ricin poisoning staged to look like a heart attack. Alina watched Volkov's face carefully. The kind of sophisticated assassination that requires resources and expertise most people don't have. Volkov went very still. I was not aware the circumstances of his death were suspicious. Most people aren't. We've kept that information contained, but I know, and I'm trying to understand who would want my father dead and why. Alina leaned back. You had business with him. Perhaps you have insights into who his enemies were. Your father had many enemies. He knew secrets that could destroy powerful people. That made him valuable, but also dangerous. Volkov's voice carried careful neutrality. I would suggest looking at anyone who felt threatened by what he knew. Like the men he met with in Singapore, Chen Wei, Marcus Pelletier, and yourself? Alina watched his reaction. Project Nightfall, The deal that fell apart when my father discovered the trafficking operations embedded in your supply chains? Volkov's expression hardened. Your father told you about that? My father told me everything, left me files, evidence, complete documentation of all his operations. Alina let the lie settle between them, including the deal he was negotiating and why it collapsed. If you have such documentation, you understand why the deal was impossible. Your father was asking us to destroy infrastructure worth billions, to disrupt operations that entire economic systems depend on. Volkov's voice dropped. He was being unrealistic. He was being moral. There's a difference. Alina met his gaze steadily. But I'm not my father. I'm not trying to force anyone to change their operations or make threats about exposure. No? Volkov studied her carefully. Then why are we meeting? Because you wanted to assess whether I'm planning revenge, whether I know you killed my father and intend to do something about it. Alina's voice remained calm. I'm here to tell you that I'm focused on building my inheritance, not avenging my father's death. Whatever happened in Singapore, whatever led to his poisoning, I'm choosing to move forward rather than backward. It wasn't true. Not entirely. But it was what Volkov needed to hear to believe she wasn't an immediate threat. Volkov was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You are not what I expected. Your father said you were kind, gentle. He worked very hard to keep you separate from his world. My father's death ended that separation. Now I'm learning to navigate the world he lived in. Alina paused. But I'm trying to do it differently. Build alliances instead of collecting enemies. Create value instead of just extracting it through leverage. A noble goal. Probably impossible, but noble. Volkov leaned forward. If you truly wish to build alliances, perhaps we could discuss mutually beneficial arrangements. Your father's network combined with my resources could create interesting opportunities. I'm not interested in trafficking operations, Mr. Volkov. Whatever opportunities you're imagining don't include that. Of course not. I would never suggest such a thing. Volkov's smile didn't reach his eyes. But there are many legitimate businesses where cooperation could benefit both of us. Perhaps we could explore those options. Perhaps. Once I've completed my evaluation of my father's holdings and determined which relationships to maintain. Alina stood. Thank you for lunch, Mr. Volkov, and for the conversation. One more thing, Miss Voss. Volkov remained seated. You said you're choosing to move forward rather than seeking revenge. I hope that's true. Because men in my position have many resources and few scruples about using them. Your father understood that. I hope you do as well. I understand perfectly. Just as I hope you understand that I'm not someone without resources or protection. My father built an empire. I've inherited it. Underestimating me would be unwise. Alina held his gaze. My father tried to force change through threats. I'm trying a different approach. But don't mistake different for weak. She left with Dmitri close behind, her heart hammering but her expression carefully controlled. In the car, she allowed herself to breathe. That was dangerous, Dmitri said quietly. Volkov is not someone to toy with. I wasn't toying. I was establishing boundaries. He needed to know I'm not planning immediate retaliation, but I'm also not someone he can push around. Alina looked at Dmitri. Did it work? He's confused, uncertain whether you're being truthful or playing a deeper game. That's good. Uncertainty makes people cautious. Dmitri navigated through traffic, but he's also calculating, trying to determine if allying with you is more valuable than eliminating you. Let him calculate. The longer he spends trying to figure me out, the more time we have to build real strength. The meeting with Marcus Pelletier 3 days later was different in tone, but similar in tension. The gallery opening was crowded with Seattle's art elite, abstract sculptures and paintings that probably cost more than houses. Pelletier moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd spent decades pretending to be respectable while selling weapons to warlords. He was younger than Volkov, maybe 50, handsome in a way that suggested expensive personal trainers and good genetics. When he approached Alina, his smile was warm and his handshake firm. Ms. Voss, I've been hoping to meet you. Your father spoke of you often. Pelletier's French accent was slight, his English impeccable. I was devastated to hear of his passing. He was a friend as well as a colleague. Thank you, Mr. Pelletier. My father mentioned you as well. Alina accepted champagne from a passing waiter. He said you were one of the most sophisticated operators he knew. Your father was generous with his compliments. In reality, I'm simply a businessman who facilitates transactions between parties who might otherwise struggle to connect. Pelletier guided her toward a particularly striking sculpture. This piece reminds me of your father's approach to business, appearing simple on the surface but revealing complexity upon closer examination. An apt comparison. Alina studied the sculpture, seeing nothing but expensive metal twisted into shapes that suggested meaning without providing it. Though my father's complexity got him killed. Pelletier's expression flickered. You believe his death was not natural? I know it wasn't. Ricin poisoning, very sophisticated, the kind of thing that requires expertise and resources. Alina turned to face him directly. The kind of thing someone in your line of work would know how to arrange. Ms. Voss, I understand you're grieving, but accusations like that are dangerous. Pelletier's voice remained pleasant, but carried warning. Your father had many enemies. Making more by throwing around unfounded allegations would be unwise. I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts. My father was poisoned. The people who did it wanted to stop him from exposing their trafficking operations. You were one of 3 men who met with him in Singapore before he died. Alina sipped her champagne. I'm simply trying to understand what happened and why. And if you discover why, what then? Pelletier's eyes were cold despite his warm tone. Will you seek revenge? Try to expose the people you believe responsible? I'm pregnant, Mr. Pelletier. My priorities have shifted from revenge to building a life my child can inherit without shame. Alina met his gaze steadily. Whatever my father was involved in, whatever deals he was negotiating, I'm choosing to focus on the legitimate aspects of his empire and let the rest go. A wise choice. Your father could be inflexible about certain principles. It made him difficult to work with toward the end. Pelletier relaxed slightly. If you're truly interested in focusing on legitimate business, I have several opportunities that might interest you. Import-export arrangements, consulting on international transactions. Nothing that would compromise your principles, but potentially very profitable. I'll consider it, once I've established which of my father's relationships are worth maintaining. Of course. And Ms. Voss, I hope you understand that while your father and I had our disagreements, I never wished him harm. His death was unfortunate, but not something I had any hand in. The lie was smooth, practiced. If you're looking for his killers, I'd suggest looking elsewhere. I'm sure you would. Alina finished her champagne. Thank you for the conversation, Mr. Pelletier. I'm sure we'll speak again. She moved away before he could respond, feeling his eyes on her back. Margaret materialized from the crowd, her expression carefully neutral until they were out of earshot. You just told both Volkov and Pelletier that you know they killed your father, but you're choosing not to act on it, Margaret said quietly. That's either brilliant strategy or suicide. I haven't decided which. It buys us time. Makes them think I'm focused on other things while we build the infrastructure to move against them safely. Alina handed her empty glass to a passing waiter. They're calculating right now whether I'm telling the truth or playing a game. That uncertainty keeps them cautious, or motivates them to eliminate you before you become a real threat. Which is why we're accelerating our timeline. I want to meet with Eleanor tomorrow. Tell her I'm ready to discuss partnership. Alina's voice dropped. And I want to start planning how to use my father's evidence to create chaos in their alliance. Make them so busy fighting each other, they don't have resources to focus on me. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You've changed. A month ago, you were someone who'd never considered playing this kind of strategic game. Now you're proposing to manipulate 3 of the world's most dangerous men into destroying each other. A month ago, my father was alive, and I was married to a man I thought I knew. Everything's different now. I'm different. Alina looked around the gallery. Wealthy people pretending to understand art, making connections, playing social games that masked the real business happening in quiet corners. My father tried to fix these people through threats. I'm going to fix the system by making their way of operating too costly to maintain. And if you become as compromised as they are in the process, then my child will inherit a fortune and a mother who understood that sometimes protecting what you love requires making choices you wish you didn't have to make. Alina's hand found her stomach again. I'm not trying to be good anymore, Margaret. I'm trying to be effective. There's a difference. The meeting with Eleanor the next day was brief and productive. Alina agreed to partnership terms: shared intelligence, mutual support, access to each other's networks. In exchange, Eleanor would help orchestrate the strategic leak of information designed to destabilize the alliance between Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier. This will take months to execute properly, Eleanor warned. We need to feed them information gradually, let their paranoia build naturally. Rush it, and they'll see the manipulation. I have time. They think I'm focused on building legitimate businesses and preparing for motherhood. Let them believe that while we work. Over the following weeks, Alina's life split into parallel tracks. Publicly, she was the grieving daughter taking control of her father's estate, attending board meetings, making strategic decisions about which companies to grow and which to sell. She met with venture capitalists and tech executives, philanthropists and politicians, building the public face of her inheritance. Privately, she was learning everything her father had known about leverage and power. Margaret taught her to read financial statements and find the stories hidden in numbers. David walked her through the operational details of running 17 corporations. Dmitri trained her in security protocols and threat assessment, and Eleanor fed her intelligence about Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier's operations, helping her understand their vulnerabilities and points of leverage. The pregnancy progressed. 12 weeks, then 16, then 20. Alina's body changed, the baby growing from abstract concept to physical reality. She found herself talking to it sometimes, explaining what she was building and why. Your grandfather was complicated, she'd say during long nights at the estate, one hand on her expanding stomach. He did terrible things for what he thought were good reasons. I'm trying to do better, trying to be powerful without being corrupt. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm going to try. For you. At 24 weeks, the ultrasound revealed she was having a daughter. Alina cried in the private medical suite Margaret had arranged, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. A daughter who would inherit everything she built, good and bad. I'm going to name her after my father, Alina told Margaret afterward. Jamie, so she knows where she comes from and what she's carrying forward. Your father would be honored and terrified. He spent your whole life trying to keep you out of his world. Now you're building an empire to pass to his granddaughter. I'm building something different than what he built. Same resources, different foundation. He ruled through fear. I'm going to rule through being genuinely useful. Alina looked at the ultrasound images. By the time she's old enough to understand, I want to hand her an empire she can be proud of. By month 6 of the pregnancy, the pieces were in motion. Eleanor had carefully leaked intelligence suggesting Chen was cooperating with international authorities, providing information about trafficking routes in exchange for immunity. The information appeared to come from multiple sources, was corroborated by fabricated evidence, and was designed to make Volkov and Pelletier paranoid about Chen's loyalty. Simultaneously, different intelligence suggested Volkov was planning to eliminate his partners and seize control of their combined operations. This information reached Chen through channels that appeared completely separate from the first leak. And to Pelletier, carefully planted evidence suggested both Chen and Volkov were negotiating with competitors, preparing to cut him out entirely. It's elegant, Eleanor said during one of their planning sessions. Each piece of intelligence is believable because it plays on existing tensions. Chen has always been the most cautious, most likely to cooperate with authorities if he thought it would protect him. Volkov is ambitious enough to consider eliminating partners. Pelletier is paranoid enough to believe he's being betrayed. We're not creating paranoia, we're amplifying what's already there. When do we know if it's working? When they start moving against each other instead of functioning as a unified threat. Eleanor pulled up surveillance reports. Chen has increased his personal security. Volkov has pulled assets out of joint ventures. Pelletier has hired investigators to look into his partner's activities. The alliance is fracturing. Slowly, but definitely. How long before they realize they're being manipulated? Possibly never. The intelligence we're feeding them is designed to look like it came from their own internal sources, leaked by disloyal subordinates or intercepted communications. Even if they suspect manipulation, they can't be sure which intelligence is real and which is fabricated. That uncertainty is almost as useful as genuine betrayal. Margaret entered the room carrying documents. We have movement on Ethan. His trial starts next month. Prosecutor's office is confident they'll get a conviction on multiple counts. Alina felt a distant satisfaction. Ethan seemed like someone from another life now, his betrayal almost quaint compared to the games she was playing with international criminals. Good. I hope he has a long time in prison to think about his choices. There's something else. Victoria Ashford wants to meet with you, personally, not through intermediaries. Margaret's expression suggested this was significant. She says she has information you'll want to hear. They met at the Cascade Club again, the location becoming a kind of neutral ground for complicated conversations. Victoria looked different than she had at their first meeting. Still polished, still beautiful, but with something harder in her expression. Experience, maybe? A recognition that the world was more complicated than she'd believed. "Thank you for seeing me," Victoria said, sitting across from Alina. "I know we didn't part on the best terms last time." "You were processing difficult information." I understood. Alina studied the woman who'd almost married her ex-husband. "Margaret said you have information for me?" "About Ethan, actually, and about how I was so thoroughly fooled." Victoria pulled out a folder. "My father's investigation uncovered something interesting. Ethan didn't just target me randomly. He was referred to me by someone who knew both our families, someone who suggested we'd be perfect for each other." "Who?" "Marcus Pelletier." Victoria watched Alina's reaction carefully. "He and my father have business dealings. Legitimate ones, as far as I know. About 8 months ago, Pelletier mentioned he knew a rising young businessman who would be perfect for me. Arranged an introduction at a charity event. Ethan and I started dating shortly after." Alina's mind raced through implications. "Why would Pelletier care about setting you up with Ethan?" "That's what I wondered. So I had our security team dig deeper. Turns out Ethan had approached Pelletier months earlier, proposing some kind of partnership. Pelletier turned him down, but apparently saw an opportunity to use Ethan for something else." Victoria leaned forward. "I think he wanted someone close to my father's business. Someone who'd marry into the family and provide access to our operations." "Why tell me this?" "Because Pelletier is dangerous, and I think he's playing games with both our families. And because you saved me from making a catastrophic mistake. I owe you." Victoria's expression was serious. "Whatever you're planning, whatever moves you're making in your father's world, watch out for Pelletier. He's more cunning than he appears." After Victoria left, Alina sat in the private room processing this new information. Pelletier had been positioning pieces on the board months before her father's death, had tried to place Ethan inside the Ashford family for reasons that probably had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with access and leverage. It was exactly the kind of long-term strategic planning her father had excelled at, and exactly the kind of thinking that made men like Pelletier so dangerous. But it was also a vulnerability. Pelletier's plan had failed. Ethan was headed to prison, Victoria was warned and angry, and the carefully constructed scheme had collapsed. That meant Pelletier had invested resources and planning in something that yielded nothing. Men who made failed investments often made desperate attempts to salvage them. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Alina told Margaret and Eleanor in an emergency meeting that evening. "Pelletier is more active than we realized. He's been making moves we haven't tracked. That means our intelligence is incomplete and our strategy needs adjusting." "What are you proposing?" Eleanor asked. "We stop trying to make them destroy each other gradually and start applying direct pressure. Feed them intelligence that forces immediate decisions rather than slow paranoia. Make the situation unstable enough that they have to act. That's riskier," Margaret warned. "Gives them less time to rationalize the intelligence, more chance they'll see through the manipulation. But it also forces them to make choices with incomplete information. Rushed decisions are usually bad decisions." Alina pulled up the files on Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier. "We've been playing a long game. Maybe it's time to accelerate it. Force crisis while I'm still pregnant, and they still see me as less threatening." Eleanor considered this. "There's a conference next month in Geneva, international development attended by business leaders and government officials. All 3 of them will be there. If we triggered crisis just before that conference, forced them to confront each other in a semi-public setting, they'd either have to resolve their suspicions or escalate them. Either way, we'd know where things stand." Alina nodded slowly. Can we create intelligence dramatic enough to force confrontation but believable enough they won't immediately suspect manipulation? I can try. But Alina, understand, once we trigger this, there's no controlling how it unfolds. They might turn on each other like we hope. Or they might unite against the common threat they can identify, you. Then we make sure they're too focused on each other to focus on me. And we make sure I have enough protection that even if they try, they can't easily succeed. Alina's hand found her stomach, the baby moving now, making its presence known. I'm 28 weeks pregnant. I have roughly 10 weeks before I'm too vulnerable to do this kind of work. We use that time. We make our moves. And we hope we're strong enough to survive whatever comes next. Margaret looked at Eleanor, then back to Alina. Your father spent 3 decades building power. You're trying to reshape his entire empire in less than a year, while pregnant, while learning how to navigate a world you knew nothing about 6 months ago. You understand how insane that is? Completely. But I don't have 3 decades. I have weeks before I'm physically compromised and months before my daughter is born, and I have to decide what kind of world to raise her in. Alina met their gazes steadily. My father tried to change this world, and it killed him. I'm going to finish what he started. Not because I'm brave or particularly clever, but because if I don't, the same people who killed him will eventually come for me and my daughter. So we move, we push, and we survive whatever comes next. Eleanor smiled, sharp and approving. James Voss's daughter. Definitely his daughter. Very well. Let's trigger a crisis and see who's still standing when it's over. The intelligence package that Eleanor deployed 2 weeks before the Geneva conference was a masterpiece of calculated chaos. To Chen Wei, fabricated communication intercepts suggested Volkov was negotiating directly with Chinese authorities, offering to expose Chen's entire operation in exchange for exclusive access to rare earth contracts. To Volkov, doctored financial records showed Chen had been siphoning profits from their joint ventures for years, hiding hundreds of millions in accounts Volkov couldn't access. And to Pelletier, surveillance photos appeared to show both Chen and Volkov meeting separately with international weapons regulators, apparently building cases to eliminate their competition. Each piece of intelligence was designed to trigger immediate response rather than careful consideration. Each played on existing fears and suspicions, and each appeared to come from completely independent sources. Disloyal employees intercepted communications, leaked financial records that somehow found their way to the right people at the right time. It's beautiful and terrifying, Margaret said, reviewing Eleanor's work. If this works, they'll tear each other apart. If it doesn't, they'll realize they're being manipulated and come after us with everything they have. Then we make sure we're ready for either outcome. Alina stood at the estate's windows, her silhouette changed by 7 months of pregnancy. The baby was active now, constant movement that reminded her every moment what she was fighting for. Dmitri, what's our security status? Comprehensive. The estate is a fortress. Your travel routes are randomized and heavily guarded. We've identified and neutralized 3 separate surveillance operations targeting you. 2 from competitors trying to assess your activities, 1 from federal agents investigating your father's estate. Dmitri pulled up security feeds. But Alina, if Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier decide you're a threat and combine resources to eliminate you, even our precautions might not be enough. Which is why we're making sure they're too busy fighting each other to focus on me. Alina turned from the window. Eleanor, when does the intelligence reach them? Chen received his package this morning. Volkov gets his tonight, Pelletier tomorrow. Eleanor's expression was carefully neutral. By the time they arrive in Geneva, they'll all be paranoid, angry, and looking for confrontation. The question is whether they confront each other or unite against the common enemy they can identify. We've made sure they can't easily identify us as the source. The intelligence appears to come from their own organizations, leaked by people they already suspected of disloyalty. Alina moved to the conference table where they'd spread out files and timelines and contingency plans. What's our worst-case scenario? Worst case? They figure out they're being manipulated, trace it back to us, and send professional killers to eliminate the problem while you're too pregnant to effectively flee or fight. Margaret's bluntness was almost refreshing. Best case? They destroy each other's operations, trigger investigations that tie them up for years, and emerge so weakened they're no longer threats to anyone. Most likely case? Something in between. They damage each other significantly, but don't completely destroy each other. Realize someone's playing them, but can't prove who. And we end up in a Cold War where they're watching us and we're watching them, but nobody makes overt moves because the cost-benefit doesn't justify it. Eleanor closed her laptop. Your father lived in that state for years. It's exhausting, but survivable. I don't want survivable. I want resolution. Alina's hand found her stomach, the baby pressing against her palm as if offering support. My daughter will be born in roughly 8 weeks. I want these men neutralized before then. I want to bring her into a world where my father's killers aren't walking around free and dangerous. That may not be possible, Margaret said gently. Justice and revenge are luxuries. Sometimes we have to settle for survival and strategic positioning. No. Alina's voice carried a certainty that surprised even her. I'm not settling, not anymore. My father settled, built an empire, but compromised his principles. Let terrible men operate freely because fighting them was too costly. I'm not making his mistakes. What are you proposing? Alina pulled out the files Eleanor had given her. Her father's complete intelligence on Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier's trafficking operations. We've been using this information to manipulate them. What if we stop being subtle? What if we just release it, all of it, every trafficking route, every financial record, every piece of evidence my father died collecting? Give it to international authorities, media organizations, human rights groups. Make it impossible for them to operate in the shadows anymore. The room went silent. Margaret and Eleanor exchanged glances that suggested they thought she'd lost her mind. That would destroy them, Eleanor said slowly, but it would also destroy any leverage you have. Once this information is public, you lose the ability to use it strategically, and it would confirm to everyone that you were behind their downfall. They'd have nothing to lose by coming after you. They're coming after me anyway. Eventually, when they figure out I'm not the harmless pregnant woman they want me to be. At least this way, I'm choosing the battlefield. Alina spread the files across the table. My father tried to use this information as a weapon to force behavior change. It didn't work. But what if we use it as a bomb? Detonate it publicly and let the fallout destroy them? You'd make powerful enemies. Everyone who benefited from their operations, everyone who looked the other way, everyone whose wealth depended on the systems they built. Margaret's voice carried warning. You'd be painting a target on yourself and your daughter. I already have a target on me. My father's enemies, Ethan's resentment, everyone who wants to test whether I'm really as powerful as I'm pretending to be. Alina met their gazes steadily. At least this way, I'm the one choosing to fight rather than spending my life defending against threats I can't control. It's suicide, Eleanor said flatly. Strategic suicide. Your father would never have done this. My father is dead because he tried to fight them quietly, because he threatened exposure but never followed through, because he believed he could force change through fear rather than facts. Alina's voice was steady, despite the enormity of what she was proposing. I'm not my father. I'm not trying to rule through leverage and secrets. I'm trying to build something clean enough that when my daughter asks me how I built our empire, I can tell her the truth without shame. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her tablet. If we're doing this, if we're really doing this, we need to do it smart. Not just dump information randomly, but orchestrate the release for maximum impact and maximum protection. You're agreeing with this insanity? Eleanor looked between them. I'm agreeing that Alina has a point. Leverage only works if you're willing to use it. Her father spent 30 years collecting secrets he never fully deployed because the cost of using them seemed too high. Meanwhile, the people he had leverage over kept operating, kept trafficking, kept killing. At some point, you have to decide whether protecting yourself is worth the cost of letting evil continue. Margaret pulled up files. If we're going to detonate this bomb, we do it at the Geneva conference. Maximum visibility, maximum witnesses, maximum international attention. We coordinate releases to media outlets, law enforcement agencies, human rights organizations simultaneously. Create such overwhelming exposure that there's no way to suppress it. And we make sure Alina is somewhere completely secure when it happens, Eleanor added, warming to the plan despite her reservations. Switzerland, maybe. The estate there that your father maintained. Dmitri and a full security team. Somewhere these men can't easily reach, even if they immediately decide to retaliate. No, Alina shook her head. I'm not hiding. If we're doing this, I'm doing it publicly. I'm standing up and saying, I know what you did to my father, and I'm making sure the world knows it too. Hiding suggests guilt or fear. I'm not guilty, and I'm done being afraid. You're 7 months pregnant, Margaret said. This is not the time for grand gestures. This is exactly the time. In 8 weeks, I'll have a newborn to protect. In 8 months, I'll be rebuilding my life around caring for an infant. If I'm going to make a stand, it has to be now, while I still can, while they still underestimate me. Alina placed both hands on her stomach, feeling her daughter move. I'm bringing her into this world fighting. I want her first breath to be in a world where her grandfather's killers are being held accountable. Over the next 10 days, they orchestrated what Margaret called the most audacious information warfare campaign she'd ever witnessed. Eleanor coordinated with journalists she trusted, investigative reporters who'd spent careers exposing corruption and would kill for a story this comprehensive. Margaret worked with prosecutors in 7 countries, providing them with evidence packages that would trigger simultaneous investigations. David managed the logistics of document verification and authentication, making sure everything they released could withstand scrutiny. And Alina prepared herself for war. At 32 weeks pregnant, she boarded a private jet bound for Geneva with Dmitri, Margaret, and a security team that looked like they could repel a small army. The flight was 11 hours of final preparations and contingency planning. If everything went according to plan, by the time the jet landed, Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier's world would be imploding. The first release goes live in 3 hours, Eleanor said via secure video link. The Guardian is publishing a comprehensive investigation into rare earth mining and trafficking. Chen's operations are the centerpiece. They have documents, photographs, testimony from rescued victims. It's devastating. Volkov's package goes live 2 hours after that, Margaret added. Multiple outlets simultaneously. BBC, Der Spiegel, The New York Times. His real estate empire built on seized properties and murdered competitors. The energy contracts secured through bribery and blackmail. All of it documented and verified. Pelletier gets his 6 hours later. After Chen and Volkov have had time to see what's happening and realize they're not the only ones being exposed, Alina watched clouds stream past the jet's windows. By the time the Geneva conference starts tomorrow morning, all 3 of them will be facing international investigations and media firestorms. They'll be too busy trying to contain the damage to focus on each other or on me. That's the theory, Dmitri said quietly. The reality might be that they immediately identify you as the source and send their people after you regardless of the consequences. Then you do what my father paid you to do. Keep me alive long enough to finish this. Alina met his gaze. I'm not backing down. Not now. The jet landed in Geneva at dawn, the city wrapped in early morning mist. Dmitri's team moved Alina through private channels to a hotel that had been secured days in advance, top floor, multiple exit routes, security checkpoints that would make reaching her room almost impossible. The Geneva conference was happening at a convention center 10 minutes away. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier had all confirmed their attendance, probably assuming they'd be conducting business as usual while their carefully orchestrated chaos unfolded back home. They had no idea the chaos was about to follow them here. Alina watched the news coverage on multiple screens Margaret had set up in the suite. The Guardian's story dropped exactly on schedule. Comprehensive, devastating, impossible to ignore. Within an hour, it was trending globally. Hashtag blood minerals became a hashtag. Chen's photograph appeared on every major news site, accompanied by words like trafficking, forced labor, crimes against humanity. 2 hours later, the stories about Volkov hit. The BBC led with Russian oligarch's empire built on murder and theft. Der Spiegel had obtained financial records showing decades of corruption. The New York Times interviewed families whose properties had been seized, whose relatives had disappeared when they refused to sell. And 6 hours after the first story dropped, Pelletier's reckoning arrived. His weapons had fueled 3 civil wars. His clients included designated terrorist organizations. His respectable facade hid an operation responsible for thousands of deaths. The evidence was overwhelming, sourced from the files James Voss had died collecting. Chen just canceled his conference appearance, David reported via video link. His lawyers released a statement denying all allegations and threatening legal action. Volkov's doing the same. Pelletier's office isn't responding to media requests. What about official responses? Law enforcement? Alina watched footage of protesters gathering outside Chen's Hong Kong headquarters. Interpol issued a statement saying they're reviewing the allegations. The FBI confirmed they're opening investigations. The UN Human Rights Council called for immediate action. Margaret's expression carried grim satisfaction. This is moving faster than I expected. The evidence is too strong, too well documented. They can't simply dismiss it. At the Geneva Conference Center, chaos was unfolding. Alina watched via security feeds as conference organizers scrambled to respond. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier had been scheduled to participate in a panel on international development. Now, protesters surrounded the building, media swarmed the entrances, and the organizers were desperately trying to decide whether to continue the conference or cancel entirely. Chen just arrived, Dmitri said, pointing to a screen showing a black Mercedes fighting through crowds. He looks furious. Chen emerged from the car surrounded by security, his face a mask of controlled rage. Reporters shouted questions. Protesters chanted. He pushed through to the building entrance without commenting, disappearing inside. 30 minutes later, Volkov arrived to similar chaos. Then Pelletier, who actually stopped to speak to reporters, his face carrying the smooth confidence of someone who'd talked his way out of scrutiny before. He's going to deny everything, Margaret predicted. Blame the reports on competitors trying to damage his reputation. Position himself as the victim of media conspiracy. But then something unexpected happened. A reporter asked Pelletier about James Voss, asked if it was true that Voss had been investigating these operations before his death, asked if Pelletier knew anything about Voss's apparent murder. Pelletier's expression flickered. Just for a moment, the smooth facade cracked. I knew James Voss, he said carefully. His death was a tragedy. I'm not aware of any evidence suggesting it was anything other than natural causes. But sources suggest he was poisoned, that he was killed because he threatened to expose the trafficking operations detailed in today's reports. Can you comment on that? I have no knowledge of any such claims. Pelletier moved toward the entrance, his security pushing reporters back. But the damage was done. The connection had been made publicly. James Voss investigating trafficking. James Voss dying mysteriously. The men he was investigating now facing exposure. Media organizations were already connecting dots, asking questions, demanding answers. Inside the conference center, the three men who'd killed her father were having what appeared to be a heated confrontation. Security footage showed them in a private room, their body language aggressive, fingers pointing, voices raised enough that the audio pickup caught fragments. Never should have moved against him. Your idea to use ricin, both wanted him silenced. They were turning on each other, exactly as planned. But instead of doing it quietly in shadows, they were doing it at an international conference with security cameras recording and reporters hovering outside. They're panicking, Eleanor said via video link. Professional paranoia is giving way to actual panic. They don't know who leaked the information, how much more exists, or whether they're about to be arrested. So they're doing what cornered predators do, turning on each other. Margaret's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression shifting to something like shock. That was my contact at Interpol. They're issuing arrest warrants, all three of them. The evidence is too strong, the international pressure too intense. They're moving now. Alina stood, her heart hammering. They're really arresting them? Now? Swiss authorities are coordinating with Interpol. The men are on Swiss soil, attending an international conference, perfect circumstances for arrest without triggering diplomatic complications. Margaret looked up from her phone. This is happening. It's actually happening. Through the security feeds, Alina watched Swiss police entering the conference center, watched them making their way toward the private room where Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier were still arguing. Watched the moment the door opened and officers flooded in. The three men who'd killed her father, who'd built empires on suffering, who'd thought themselves untouchable, were being arrested on international warrants in front of cameras that would broadcast it globally. Chen tried to run, made it 3 steps before being tackled by officers. Volkov shouted something in Russian, his face purple with rage. Pelletier maintained his composure, allowing himself to be handcuffed with the dignified resignation of someone who'd always known this might happen eventually. And Alina stood in her hotel suite, 7 months pregnant, watching her father's killers face consequences, feeling something break open in her chest that was part grief, part triumph, part exhausted relief. You did it, Margaret said softly. You actually did it. We did it! Alina's hand found her stomach, the baby moving as if celebrating too. My father spent 30 years collecting this evidence. You helped orchestrate its release. Eleanor provided the intelligence network. Dmitri kept me alive long enough to see it through. This wasn't just me. But it was your choice to release it. Your decision to stop playing games and just expose everything. Margaret moved to stand beside her at the window overlooking Geneva. Your father would be proud, and possibly horrified, but definitely proud. The arrest dominated every news cycle for the next 72 hours. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier were being held pending extradition hearings. The evidence against them was so comprehensive that legal experts were calling it one of the most significant international criminal cases in decades. Their empires were collapsing in real time, assets frozen, associates arrested, operations dismantled as law enforcement agencies across 7 countries moved simultaneously. And slowly, carefully, journalists began asking who had provided the evidence, who had compiled such detailed documentation of crimes spanning 3 decades, how the investigation had remained secret until exploding so spectacularly. James Voss's name kept appearing. The consultant who'd died mysteriously. The fixer who'd known everyone's secrets. The man who'd apparently been building a case against these criminals before his death. And then, 3 days after the arrests, a reporter made the connection. James Voss's daughter had appeared publicly at a Seattle gala weeks earlier, had been seen with high-powered legal counsel and serious security, had inherited her father's estate. Was she the source? The media descended. Calls flooded Margaret's office. Reporters camped outside the estate in Seattle and the hotel in Geneva. Everyone wanted the story of the pregnant daughter who'd brought down her father's killers. You need to make a statement, Margaret said. Control the narrative before it controls you. What do I say? The truth. As much of it as you're comfortable with. That your father was investigating these men. That you inherited his evidence. That you chose to release it because crimes of this magnitude deserve exposure. Keep it simple. Don't admit to the strategic manipulation, just the evidence release. Alina stood in front of cameras for the first time in her life on a gray Geneva afternoon, her pregnant silhouette making every news outlet's opening shot. Margaret stood beside her, Dmitri behind her, a visible reminder that she was protected and supported. My name is Alina Voss. My father, James Voss, spent 3 decades working in international business consulting. During that work, he uncovered evidence of serious crimes, human trafficking, corruption, violence. He was building a case to expose these operations when he died unexpectedly 7 months ago. Alina paused, letting the implication settle. After his death, I inherited his files. I spent months reviewing the evidence, verifying its authenticity, and struggling with what to do with it. These are powerful men, dangerous men, men who've operated with impunity for decades because they were too wealthy and too connected to face consequences. Her hand found her stomach, the gesture visible to every camera. I'm about to become a mother, and I realized I couldn't bring my daughter into a world where I had evidence of these crimes and chose to remain silent. So I provided everything my father had collected to law enforcement agencies, human rights organizations, and media outlets. I trusted that sunlight is the best disinfectant. That truth, even uncomfortable truth, is better than comfortable lies. Questions exploded from reporters. Alina held up a hand. I won't answer questions about specific evidence or ongoing investigations. I will say this. My father died investigating these men. I don't know if his death was natural or if it was silenced. That's for authorities to determine. But I know he believed some things are worth fighting for even when the fight is dangerous. He taught me that. And now I'm honoring his memory the only way I know how, by making sure his work wasn't wasted. She turned and walked back into the hotel, leaving reporters shouting questions at her back. Margaret followed, closing the door on the chaos. That was perfect, Margaret said. You gave them enough to feed the story without admitting to anything that could be used against you legally. The narrative is now, brave daughter honors murdered father, rather than pregnant woman manipulates international criminals. I'm too tired to care about narratives. Alina sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting like a physical weight. Are we done? Can we finally be done? Almost. We still need to manage the fallout, protect against any remaining threats, and figure out what happens to your father's empire now that you've deployed its most powerful weapons. Margaret pulled out her tablet. But the immediate crisis is resolved. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier are in custody facing charges that will likely put them away for life. Their operations are being dismantled. The trafficking routes are being shut down. You did what you set out to do. Over the following weeks, as Alina's pregnancy entered its final phase, the world rearranged itself around the chaos she'd unleashed. The Geneva arrests triggered a cascade of additional investigations. Associates were arrested. Shell companies dissolved. Billions in assets were frozen. The trafficking networks that had operated in shadows for decades were exposed to light. They couldn't survive. Eleanor reported that the intelligence community was treating the Voss leaks as the most significant disclosure of organized crime operations in modern history. Law enforcement agencies were overwhelmed with leads. Human rights organizations were working to rescue victims from the now exposed trafficking routes. And slowly, quietly, the people who'd underestimated Alina Voss began reassessing their calculations. She returned to Seattle at 36 weeks, too pregnant to fly commercially, but not willing to stay in Geneva. The estate felt different now, still a fortress, but one she'd proven she could defend from. Margaret was already restructuring her father's empire, selling off the operations too compromised by his leverage-based model, strengthening the legitimate businesses, building something cleaner. Victoria Ashford sent flowers with a note. "Thank you for saving me from more than a bad marriage. Turns out my father was more entangled with Pelletier than I knew. We're cleaning house too. Let's get coffee when you're recovered from giving birth to what is clearly going to be a formidable daughter." Eleanor visited the week before Alina's due date, bringing intelligence briefings and something like friendship. "You've made quite a name for yourself," Eleanor said, sitting in the estate's living room. "The widow who brought down an empire. Though technically you're not a widow since you divorced Ethan before he went to prison." "How is that going, by the way?" "He was convicted on 14 counts, sentenced to 18 years. He'll be eligible for parole in 12 if he behaves himself." Eleanor sipped tea. "He tried to sell his story to a journalist. Poor wronged husband destroyed by vengeful wife. Nobody's buying it. The evidence was too clear and your reputation is too solid. You're the sympathetic pregnant daughter who exposed international criminals. He's just a con artist who got caught." "Good." Alina shifted in her chair, uncomfortable in the way late pregnancy made everything uncomfortable. "What about my father's empire? Am I going to be able to maintain it without his leverage model?" "That's the interesting question. You've dismantled his primary tools, the leverage, the secrets, the fear-based compliance, but you've replaced them with something potentially more powerful, reputation as someone who actually follows through on principles. People are starting to see you as someone who can be trusted precisely because you prioritized exposure over leverage." Eleanor set down her tea. "Your father ruled through fear of what he knew. You might be able to rule through trust that you'll do what you say. It's a different model, slower to build, harder to maintain, but potentially more sustainable." "That's what I'm hoping. Something I can explain to my daughter without shame." "Speaking of your daughter, have you chosen a name?" "Jamie Voss? After my father? So she always knows where she came from and what she's carrying forward." Eleanor smiled. "James would have loved that and been absolutely terrified of it. Fair warning, raising a daughter in this world is complicated. Teaching her to be powerful without becoming corrupt, confident without becoming cruel, strategic without becoming cynical. Your father struggled with that. You'll struggle too." "I know, but I'll have help. Margaret, David, Dmitri, you, if you're willing." Alina met Eleanor's gaze. "I want to build something better than what my father built. Not just wealthier or more powerful, actually better, more ethical, more sustainable, worth inheriting. Ambitious, probably impossible, but worth trying." Eleanor stood, gathering her things. "I should go. You need rest and I need to get back to work. But Alina, call me when the baby arrives. I'd like to meet the next generation of the Voss legacy, and maybe offer some advice on raising daughters who inherit empires." Alina went into labor 3 days later at 3 in the morning, her water breaking with the kind of dramatic timing her father would have appreciated. Dmitri drove her to the private hospital Margaret had arranged, Margaret herself meeting them there, looking simultaneously terrified and determined. 12 hours later, as dawn broke over Seattle, Jamie Voss came into the world screaming with the kind of fury that suggested she'd inherited her mother's temper and her grandfather's presence. Alina held her daughter for the first time and felt everything shift, all the power she'd accumulated, all the revenge she'd enacted, all the empire she'd inherited, suddenly secondary to the tiny human in her arms. "She's perfect," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. James would have been so proud. "He would have spoiled her absolutely rotten," Alina agreed, studying her daughter's face. "But he also would have taught her to be strong, to fight for what matters, to understand that power is a tool, not an identity." Over the next weeks, as Alina recovered and learned the impossible task of caring for a newborn while running an empire, the final pieces of her revenge fell into place. Chen, Volkov, and Pelletier were all convicted in separate trials. Chen received 43 years. Volkov got 37. Pelletier, who'd cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence, received 29 years. All three would likely die in prison. All three had lost everything they'd built. All three had been brought down by a pregnant woman they'd dismissed as irrelevant. Ethan sent a letter from prison. Margaret intercepted it, but Alina asked to read it anyway. It was predictably self-pitying, blaming everyone but himself, painting Alina as vindictive, claiming he'd loved her and she'd destroyed him. She read it once, then filed it away. Evidence of who he'd really been, saved for the day Jamie might ask about her father. The day Jamie turned 3 months old, Alina returned to work full-time. Margaret had restructured the empire into something leaner and cleaner, 7 corporations instead of 17, all of them operating legitimately, none of them dependent on leverage or secrets. The revenue was lower, but the foundation was stronger, something Alina could build on without shame. Eleanor had become a true partner, her intelligence network feeding Alina information that let her stay ahead of threats and opportunities. David managed operations with the efficiency her father had valued. Dmitri kept her safe, now protecting both Alina and Jamie with the dedication of someone who'd found purpose beyond simply following orders. And slowly, carefully, Alina built relationships based on genuine mutual benefit rather than fear or obligation. Rebuilt her father's network on principles he'd aspired to but never quite achieved. Created an empire that generated wealth through value creation rather than just information extraction. It was harder than ruling through fear, slower to build, required more trust and more risk. But when Alina looked at Jamie sleeping in her crib, she felt confident she was building something worth inheriting. 6 months after Jamie's birth, Alina stood at her father's grave for the first time since the funeral. She'd been avoiding it, too raw, too complicated, too much unprocessed grief. But now, with Jamie in her arms, it felt right. "I did it, Dad," she said quietly to the headstone. "Brought down the men who killed you. Transformed your empire into something cleaner. Built a life I can be proud of. Became someone powerful enough to protect what I love without losing who I am in the process." Jamie cooed, reaching for the flowers Alina had brought. "I'm raising her differently than you raised me. Not hiding her from the world, but teaching her to navigate it. Not keeping her separate from power, but showing her how to wield it ethically. She's going to know everything, the good and the bad, the complicated and the compromised. And she's going to learn to make better choices than either of us did." The wind moved through trees, carrying the smell of fresh earth and new growth. "I miss you. Miss your Sunday calls, your terrible jokes, your absolute certainty that I was capable of anything I set my mind to. You were right about that, by the way. I was capable. I just needed circumstances terrible enough to discover it." Alina adjusted Jamie in her arms. "Thank you for the inheritance. All of it. The money, the power, the weapons, the trust. I'm trying to honor it. Trying to be worthy of it. Trying to build something Jamie can inherit without shame." She stayed for a few more minutes, then walked back to where Dmitri waited by the car. As they drove away, Alina watched the cemetery disappear in the rear-view mirror, her father's grave becoming smaller until it was gone. But his legacy remained, transformed, restructured, cleaned of its worst elements, but still powerful, still influential, still capable of protecting what mattered and punishing those who threatened it. Alina Voss had walked into a lawyer's office 7 months pregnant and facing divorce, believing herself powerless and alone. She was leaving that office, that version of herself, further behind with every day. The woman she'd become was harder, but not cruel, powerful, but not corrupt, capable of wielding empire without being consumed by it. And Jamie, sleeping peacefully in her car seat, would inherit all of it, would learn from her mother's choices, the good and the bad, and hopefully make even better ones. Would carry forward the Voss name not as a burden of secrets and leverage, but as a legacy of principle and power, used in service of something beyond mere wealth. The woman they'd tried to discard had become unstoppable. The wife dismissed as irrelevant had destroyed international criminal empires. The daughter who'd buried her father in grief had honored him in ways he could never have imagined. And now, driving through Seattle with her daughter in the back seat and her father's transformed empire waiting for her direction, Alina Voss allowed herself to feel what she'd been too busy surviving to acknowledge: pride, grief, triumph, exhaustion, hope. The complicated emotions of someone who'd fought impossible battles and emerged scarred but victorious. Someone who'd learned that power without principle was poison, but principle without power was performance. Someone who'd found the terrible, necessary balance between the two. Her phone buzzed. Margaret with questions about a board meeting. Eleanor with intelligence about a potential opportunity. David with operational updates. The empire never slept, never stopped demanding attention and decisions, and the constant calibration between profit and ethics. But now, looking at Jamie in the mirror, Alina felt ready for all of it. Not because it was easy, it would never be easy, but because she'd built something worth protecting, something worth growing, something worth passing forward to a daughter who would hopefully make it even better. The revenge was complete. The enemies were defeated. The empire was transformed. And Alina Voss, 7 months removed from the worst day of her life, had become exactly what her father had always believed she could be: powerful, principled, unbreakable, and just getting started.